can hear the audio, we'll just do an audio check here, and then we've got the Facebook stream going live right now.
Us live on YouTube.
It's a little bit of a 10 or 15 second delay for get across the country to you.
12, 15. That's right. Oh, you think that's what's happening here?
Or to get to the other side of the pond. All right. We should be live. Yeah, we should be live on all the accounts. If we've got somebody in the TikTok comments, if you could let us know if you can hear us okay, that would be a really good start for the morning, and then we can not waste a bunch of time on equipment checks.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice if it all just came together?
Wouldn't that be awesome? We do need Ian and Blitz to join up on the TikTok stream.
I've already requested.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah,
I'm behind. I'm
second.
so sorry, guys. I'm slacking. All right, see Dr.
As Kevin
Blitz.
Sorbo would say, disappointed!
And
just to be clear, the reference is he
was a bad actor, and he saw the disappointed stage directions, and he
shouted it instead of being disappointed. That's the reference, just so everybody knows.
And then, Kelvin, I see you wanting to get in, but we're not taking guests on TikTok. We're only taking guests on YouTube. For everyone here that really wants to join into the discussion, you have to join us on the link on our YouTube page. You'll be able to request in, and we'll get you right into the discussion. It'll be a lot of fun. And that's how we're doing it with this particular live stream. It's not the same as our other live streams.
Somebody said that there's mad echo.
Well, there was just a second ago when you joined the TikTok stream because you were double micing it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
All right. See, Ian, I had to. Okay, now we've got both profiles, Ian and Dr. Blitz, into the stream here, and I'm actually going to pull open because we're streaming from my personal profile until our actual TikTok profile goes live, which we don't know if that'll actually happen because it's like a 30-day waiting period.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, good point.
Part of me wonders if this reevaluation of policy had anything to do with me, because I would consistently, every time I got bananaed, we'll call it, I would just create a new account, and then, magically I'd get the 10,000 followers, and this would all happen over the course of like 2 days. So I wonder if the 30-day policy is a response to that, but I'm not sure.
It's absolutely your fault. Absolutely.
I do wonder.
I would definitely blame you.
Just so everybody knows, we can blame Ian for that. Just going forward.
But make sure you're double tapping on this screen. If you're watching this from the future on YouTube, for example, make sure you're dropping that subscription, leaving that thumbs up, trying to do all the stuff that the algorithm prefers to get it in front of all the people. If you're watching on TikTok, true. Yeah. Crucify that like button on
Damn
on
to
YouTube.
hell that subscribe button.
I'm curious what amount of Christian callers we'll be able to get at this time period, only because our channel's new and most of the Christians are in church. I think that what we could learn from this is that the Christians that do call us right now are the worst Christians on the planet, because they're skipping church right now to get cooked on the internet.
The best Christians. They might be the Christians that go to church at like 8 a.m. so they can get their Jesus in early.
Very good point.
True. Yeah, I don't know. I've had some experiences with debating Christians on Sundays where they'll still be at church and then they'll go and get like their pastor, and then I just rinse both of them, and that's a lot of fun.
I can imagine. Why were they on TikTok during Mass?
It was like after church.
Wait a minute.
Being on
Catholics
TikTok.
call it Mass, right?
Oh.
What do regular Christians call it?
It's named Mass after your mom.
Heyo. She's a lovely woman. Thank you very much.
It goes. Sorry, I grew up at a Catholic school. That's all we know is derogatory remarks, and we never learn how to do math, which is why you don't find a whole lot of religious people in the STEM fields.
I mean, look, they do their best, okay?
Yeah. You know, I did a interesting study a long time ago when I was in college on the GPA rate between private versus non-private schools, and then religious versus non-religious schools. And it was really interesting because the people that were going to private religious schools consistently had higher GPAs, but had a much lower bar for curriculum, which produced this really wild offset where they thought they were really intelligent. As it turns out, they only thought that because they were in an echo chamber, and they were actually statistically lower down on the aptitude charts.
Interesting.
Feels bad. I went to a religious private high school.
If you're watching the live stream right now, whether you're on Facebook or TikTok or YouTube, there is a link in the description of the video. You might think to yourself, these guys have no idea what they're talking about. God is absolutely real. And I have evidence, or I have a fantastic philosophical argument for it. Well, we'd love to hear it. We're here to have adult discussions. We will only mock you if entirely necessary. But I don't think that's the goal here. I think the goal is to have some adult dialogue. So if you want to have some adult dialogue, we're down for it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we would absolutely love to talk to you and debate with you. The way you can do that is by going to tinyurl.com/uaguest. No spaces, no dashes, just tinyurl.com/uaguest. We would absolutely love to debate with you. So if you feel up to it, feel free to join in that way, and we can have a civil dialogue about religion. So if you're interested in that, feel free.
We could
So I'm
also.
curious.
Oh, go ahead.
What time does church usually end?
It's different for every church service because like a mega church will have like 3 or 4 services, and so but you might like the general public goes to church anywhere between 10 o'clock and 1 p.m. But it's been my experience that if you live in the Midwest, the goal is to get people home before kickoff.
You gotta help me out here. Not a big sports guy. What time is that?
It's about 1:30.
Okay, just checking. I know that it's football. I know.
Right.
The American kind with the not ball-shaped ball.
Yes, it's the other football where you use your hands and not your feet.
Right. Except the one time that you do use your feet.
Right. That's right. God says go sports. Big W for sports ball, guys. So I see some Christians already crashing out in the TikTok comments. Precept Mars, now's your opportunity. You've got 2 guys on the stage that are versed in philosophy, and one guy who doesn't know philosophy but knows the Bible. So we'd love to hear from you. You're in every one of my lives crashing out, which is wild to me. How much of your time, Ian and Blitz, do you spend in theist people's lives just shouting into the void?
Oh, not very long. Typically, I either request to join or I leave.
Yeah. Unless there are a few instances. Sometimes I will request to join some random tiny creators live, and then have a good conversation. They bring up Darth. Darth talks over me for 2 minutes, kicks me, and then I just hang out in the comments and listen while Darth Dawkins crashes out over the fact that I treated him so poorly for 20 minutes. That's always fun.
No, Darth Dawkins doesn't do. Darth Dawkins won't talk to me. He just refuses at this point.
That's okay.
I can't even get 2 minutes with Darth Dawkins. If I'm lucky, if I open with an apology for how badly I behaved in the last time I spoke to him, I might get like 2 or 3 questions before he kicks me.
Yeah. So we've got some people in the TikTok queue, and so if you are
we also have a person here. I don't know if you know.
person.
Yeah, do you see like the
Oh,
fourth person?
I didn't see him come in. Sorry, give me 1 second. Oh, it looks like we've got Placid or Placide. Is that correct? Did we get your name?
There's a bit of an echo.
Yeah, I hear that. Hold on a second.
By the way,
Yes.
in the TikTok comments, don't dox people even if you don't like them, okay?
Right.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How
well.
are you?
I'm doing pretty well.
Is it me echoing or the guest echoing?
I think it's the guest. Guest, do you have headphones?
I do. Should I take this out?
Maybe.
Or you know, that's curious. I'm not sure why it would be echoing if you have headphones in.
I do have headphones in right now. I'm speaking. Is it echoing? And I can also mute when I'm not speaking.
I'm echoing through your device, I think.
Yeah, there's a bit of an echo there.
I think it's gone though. I think it's okay.
Yeah. Well, it might be because he muted.
He's just
I'm
muted.
I'm muted. I'll go ahead and switch up the. I'll take out the headphones. Try it a different way.
Sure. All right, let us know when you're ready. I don't hear myself echoing. Do you hear anyone echoing?
He's muted though.
Oh, that's true. He is muted. Yeah.
I hope he comes back. I know, it seems like this person...
I know Placid. We've spoken before.
Is this Placid
Generally
Saw?
good faith. Yeah.
Oh, Placid Saw. Okay. Once upon a time, when I first ran into him, he seemed to be on the fence between atheism and agnosticism, and now he seems to be an agnostic. Is that the situation?
Not clear to me. Placid is certainly a spiritualist, as far as I know.
Okay.
Or at least last time I spoke with him. But
Okay.
We'll see.
All right, Placid, can you hear us? He's got his microphone muted and everything.
So funny story, completely unrelated, but I just wanted to share this with everybody. There are currently flat earthers in Antarctica.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tell me more.
Yeah, there are flat earthers. There was this guy, Will Duffy, who's a pastor, who organized a trip to bring a bunch of flat earthers, or 2 flat earthers and then 2 more who paid for it themselves, and a few globe earthers to Antarctica to see if there's a 24-hour sun. And who would have guessed there was a 24-hour sun? And now the entire flat Earth community is imploding and calling people who are calling people who said that would be evidence against the flat Earth shills. It's hilarious to watch from the outside.
Oh my god,
That is really funny.
So is the whole thing being live recorded? Are we going to be able to see video of this somewhere?
Yeah, there's so everybody brought like they have like 16 cameras that are all doing different experiments, and there's like 24-hour live streams. Candace Owens' producer is there.
Holy shit. Okay.
Yeah. Candace Owens sent her producer to go to this thing because Candace Owens is like on the fence about the shape of the Earth.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's not surprising. She's as dumb as the rock she's on, but like, it's wild that a public figure with her amount of following would be willing to risk her reputation by saying something as stupid as the Earth is flat.
No, I think,
Well, she also thinks the moon landing didn't happen, so.
Oh,
yeah. I think all of these are just stand-ins for anxieties related to like the government lying to us. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
There's like a lot of conspiratorial beliefs that are hard to understand as like propositional. In fact, if you believe that Princess Diana already died before her car crash, you are more likely to believe that she is still alive and she faked her death. So if she already died, you're more likely to believe that she is still alive. So it makes me think that conspiracy theories that people espouse aren't really based on like propositional attitudes, but rather on like anxieties that manifest themselves in like a variety of beliefs.
yeah, that sounds right to me.
Okay.
So
Anyway, that'll be
try to
fun.
get
Placid.
Hi, how are you, Dr. Blitz?
I
okay.
think we all can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, fantastic.
We have a green screen popping up on the TikTok live, so we should be good to go.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'll pull his video feed up. Placid, do you want a video or not?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Did you want your video to be shown here, or do you want just audio?
Just audio, if that's okay.
All right, not a problem. Not a problem. All right. Well, welcome in.
Oh wait, there's a big echo on YouTube apparently.
Oh, on YouTube?
Yeah.
Give me a second.
They demand the headphones back in.
It went away, and then it came back. Is it echoing just when the guest talks, or when everyone talks? Just from Placid? Placid, can you say something for us? He's muted again.
Yes. Is there echo right now?
I don't really hear an echo.
YouTube
What about
is hearing it though?
Yeah, throw a 1 in the YouTube comments, guys, if you're hearing Placid echo for us. You're saying the guest is echoed? Just guest right now?
I have no.
All right, give me 1 second.
I have nothing in. Okay.
I know the fix for it. Don't worry.
You know the fix?
I think so. All right, go ahead and give it a shot now there, Placid.
Okay.
Is that better, guys?
Just testing it out. I hope that is somewhat better.
Looks like we're good on audio on YouTube and on TikTok. You do sound like you're in a bathroom, but that's fine. Sometimes you just sound like that.
Yeah, it is a whole
Okay,
echoey room. Sorry about that.
No
you're
worries.
fine. All right, so tell us what you think. What do you think about this background we got going up?
So I can't see the background, to be honest. What I see is just the equations for the.
Oh, sorry.
Chalkboard.
I just meant the proposition God isn't real. That's the background on the TikTok live and on the YouTube live. I was asking about your thoughts on that.
I wanted to discuss that. So I'm coming from the perspective of esotericism, a Christian esotericist, and I do very much believe that God is real, and I think it's important to discuss that idea. From what I understand, and I'm gonna ask, my understanding is that you guys are coming from a reductive physicalist perspective. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. We're just atheists generally. I'd probably identify myself close to materialism, but ultimately I am agnostic about these types of metaphysical claims. I think atheism is compatible with a wide variety of metaphysics. But can I get a definition of God? I'm not sure what Christian esotericism refers to.
Yeah, so essentially, Christian esotericism adheres to the scriptures, but it interprets them in an anagogic way, that there is representation, and Christ, basically the answer to your question, what is God? God is the founding reality and the why and how for all of the phenomenal things that we experience in the universe.
I want to make sure I understand your position too. Are you suggesting that the God you're referring to, he's more or less revealed by the Christian Bible?
Yes, I would say that the scriptures definitely do a very good job in revealing God.
Okay.
So
Does God have a mind?
Yes.
And
Okay.
when you say the Bible reveals God, you don't mean in a literalist sense, right? You don't mean in the sense that, who was it? Was it Jacob that literally saw the face of God, or that, there was literally a talking snake? You don't mean that, right? You mean like kind of in a metaphorical or a kind of allegorical, or I suppose anagogical, I suppose was the word he used, way of revealing himself. Right? Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Absolutely, yes. Mm-hmm. Correct.
So sorry, to be clear, the Bible is not, it's not like literal history, right?
So I would say that there are certain things that have some historical basis, but for the most part, when we're talking about histories, no. So I have done studies in theology. I am aware that there's disparity in regards to the historicity and the accuracy of that when it comes to scripture. So the base answer is no. When it comes to history, it doesn't. For example, pharaohs and these stories within the Exodus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, things like that. No, we don't have evidence in regards to that historically.
Okay, so I guess what's the evidence that God exists?
So, yeah, the evidence in terms of God would be the foundational functioning, the foundation of the science, and it is the foundation of evidence itself. And I think that's something that's misunderstood when we're talking about Christian esotericism and scripture. So because the literalist is coming from a perspective that's saying that the phenomenal things are, have some connection to this anthropomorphic God, then the question makes sense. So what is the evidence for that? But where we're coming from is we're saying that God, that Christ, is the foundation for what would be reason, what would be logic, what would be function, what would be the premise of measure itself. So there isn't any type of evidence that would prove that. It would be, there's an aseity and an axiomatic foundation. And I think that's really what is important.
So how would you differentiate between some sort of non-theistic universe where perhaps there's some alternative foundation, maybe Platonism, whatever you want to use as some non-theistic foundation for logic or for intelligibility, and the theistic universe that you're proposing? How would you differentiate between those two models of reality?
Intention and will. So in the models where there's a classic deism or some type of a non-theistic model, then we just have a variety of different functions. And those functions are without any particular intention. Whereas within the Christian esotericism, it is about the will and intent of God.
So why does the foundation have a mind?
Why does the foundation have a mind?
Yeah, how do we know that the foundation has a mind?
So it would be a teleological recognition that
What is that?
the functioning
what does that mean?
structure. It means, so we take a look at, in the same way that it's the watchmaker, what you would say is the watchmaker fallacy, that we see that there is complexities and that these complexities are indicative of mind. Well, in this case, I would say the same. So, just to get down to it, that what we observe is very much indicative of intention. And
what's the
that intention is
teleology?
indicative of mind.
What's the teleology of kids with cancer?
So you're asking, theological is like, what is the specific,
what's the purpose of it?
Sure. What's the purpose of suffering is what you're asking.
No,
And
not suffering
answer-
general. Just like kids with cancer. Let's focus on just one.
Sure, a child with cancer that suffers. There's a lot of different purpose, but you're asking me to know the mind of God, and I wouldn't. I can give a general.
Because you claimed that the universe is teleological, because there's just so much purpose that's like just so self-evident that certainly it must be indicative of God's existence, but it kind of seems like that all fell apart. That for some things you want to say, well, this obviously has a telos, which is self-evident, and then for other things you're like, what, we couldn't possibly know what the telos is. So it seems like there's a bit of inconsistency.
No, I think it's very consistent. The telos just means that there is intention and that it is crafted meticulously by design. When we're talking about the intent, why the suffering as a particular, that's something that I would be now reaching into the mind of God. Well, why this as this construct? But what we do know within Scripture is that suffering is used as a purification tool. So
that seems pretty
you have
fucked
a
up.
child who's 3 years old, who has done nothing. From our perspective, we say this child is undeserving of this type of suffering. And so therefore, God then must be a terrible person. I understand the argument, and I would just simply say that very well may be the case. Because to make an argument that, no, he's not a terrible person, suffering is good, why even go down that road? I think it would be more honest to say it's a terrible situation whenever children suffer. That doesn't mean that there's not a God.
So kids have cancer for purification?
I didn't say that. I said that what we do know is that the scripture speaks about suffering as a depurative process. That through suffering, for example, in Hebrews, Christ was made perfect through his suffering. This is a reference. So if someone is asking, what do you mean? So in Hebrews, Christ was made perfect through his suffering.
Figuratively or literally?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, did Christ suffer figuratively or literally in real life? I guess I'm trying to figure out if that part of the Bible is true or if that part's metaphor.
So it's true. It's both. There was physical suffering. There's mental suffering. There's emotional suffering.
Okay.
And just to clarify, do you mean he was made perfect literally or figuratively? Insofar as, was he already perfect from the moment of conception, or from the moment of birth or conception, say? Or did he become perfect through a process?
Right, so it would be the latter. It would be the becoming perfect of a process.
So God was not always, so God is not essentially perfect?
Correct.
So God changes?
And I have to give nuance to that. Yes.
So the foundation of reality changes?
No, the foundation of reality doesn't change, but Christ is the representative of reality manifest, and manifestations change.
Okay, is reality a liar?
I don't see how reality
because
could
Christ
lie.
is a liar, so I'm just wondering, is reality a liar?
Why don't you go ahead and give me the basis for the statement Christ is a liar?
Yeah, Justin, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, basically what you're suggesting is that God does change, but Numbers 23:19 says God does not change.
Oh, no, specifically the time that Christ lied about, for example, all of heaven returning.
Oh yeah, Matthew 16:27 through 28.
Yeah.
Let's read it real quick. I've got my Bible with me. Matthew 16:27 through 28. I think Placid's probably read this before, but we'll run through it because he's been around the debate circles pretty long. Give me 1 second.
Matthew 16:7 through 28.
Yeah, Matthew 16:27 through 28. And I've got it pulled up here. It says, the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everybody for what has been done. Truly, I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. But all the people there obviously tasted death. They're all gone.
Why don't you read that again?
Sure. The Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everybody for what has been done. Truly, I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Some translations will say he will repay everybody for their deeds. It can go either way there.
Okay. And so your point is that the people that heard this message died before Christ's return, therefore that was a lie. Is that the basis?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Right.
Or a mistake, right?
It could be a mistake.
Yeah, so then you're either defending that reality is a liar or reality is mistaken. I take both of those to be nonsense.
Yeah, where I'm coming from is a lack of understanding and interpretation on your part.
Sure.
Yeah,
So you look at that and say that death in this context, it means this time scale, and it means this physicality, which there's nothing that would evidence that.
So what does
That's an
death mean?
interpretation on your part. So death is always, scripture from our perspective is always coming from a multi perspective.
How do you know
or
that?
expression.
How do you know that the Bible has multiple expressions?
Well, when we take a look at the history of what we're talking about the Bible, for example, when we're talking about Old Testament in particular, then we know that the authors were coming from, they were speaking exoterically and esoterically. And we know this because this is made clear through the Mishnahs, which are explanations specific to the writing.
So you
They
think
were looking to,
we should interpret the Bible through the lens of the Mishnah?
I
Because
think that it would be,
they rejected Jesus.
Based and rabbi pilled?
Sure. So, yes, it would be necessary in order to understand the interpretation, because it answers the very thing
Mishnahs
that you
didn't
brought
care
up.
about the New Testament, right?
No, the
The
Mishnah.
Talmud
Mishnah
doesn't care about it at all.
Yeah, the Mishnahs were
So,
commentary on the Old Testament.
Which is what I said. I'm very clear about that. So, in regards to one, the statement that you made that there is the rejection of Christ, that was due to the perspective, the spiritual perspective that they had. There wouldn't be any type of physical expression. And so therefore, a person who made the claim that they were the incarnation of all reality is something that stood in contrast to the held belief. This is one, again, an evidence that they're coming from an esoteric and not an exoteric perspective.
Cool. So we should
which
accept
is the same
the
when it comes to
teachings
death.
in the Mishnah, except for the teachings about that reject Jesus.
I didn't say that. So when we're talking about Jesus, we know that the Mishnah is not speaking to the New Testament, right? And so the New Testament is, again, when Paul is writing, Paul is writing from an esoteric perspective. The Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, these synoptic gospels, they're also expressing from an esoteric perspective. It is a misunderstanding and a mistranslation that there is a direct, correlation to our, interpretation where it's literal. There's nothing. That's not what it's about.
Okay.
At all.
Did the Old Testament say that the Messiah was going to come and do literal things?
Isaiah 6:9, yeah, as well as others.
Okay,
Correct.
so you like the literal parts that support your Messiah, but you don't like the literal parts that disprove your Messiah?
No, again, so that's why I'm here, because I believe that there's a grave injustice that's done when persons such as yourself who don't know the theology, who don't know the scripture.
I've got 2 degrees in biblical studies, and I can read Hebrew, I can actually read Greek as well. I'm just not very good with the grammar. So just to be aware, you're not talking to a noob.
Oh, and I don't think any of you, I know you all are very formidable, very knowledgeable, and I don't mean any disrespect. I mean, and obviously you have a greater capacity in regards to the fact that you do speak Hebrew and Greek. I do not. What I can say is that the eisegetics and the exegetics is very, very critical. And when it comes to what you just said, well, what about this idea that there was the Messiah? They were speaking very much in a political sense about a king that would come and liberate.
Yes, exactly.
Right, as you know.
And why did they speak about that?
So they weren't speaking about what
they were talking about the liberation of the people. And why were they expecting that?
Can I just jump in? I just have a question from somebody who is a noob as far as biblical studies go. Maybe you both know the answer. So it is my understanding that the Hebrew Bible, the Messiah as described in the Hebrew Bible, was expected to be a political leader with, enacting political freedom for the Israelites and so on. So wouldn't we have then expected, if Jesus was actually the Messiah, as foretold, fulfilling prophecy, that he would have been a political leader and not a spiritual leader, unless the prophecies in the Hebrew Bible were wrong? Am I just mistaken there?
No, you got it.
No, that's exactly the point, and I believe what Justin is driving to. that they would be expecting this political leader to rise up, to use the sword in order to liberate them from the oppressors that they had at the
Right.
time.
But why did
And
they
over
believe
time,
that?
right? They believed that because of the prophecies that had been foretold
Right.
in regards to that.
Yes, because their God said so. Right.
Correct. And so now when we're looking at it, so yes, that is the case. So then Jesus the Christ, who's making these claims about a heaven on earth coming and him being the physical incarnation of the truth, is absolutely inimical to everything that the Jews understood, and therefore there was a rejection in order to, respond to that. And so there's a delineation between this esoteric understanding and the exoteric. We're looking for a leader who's going to lead our armies against our foes and liberate us, and from that time from the Romans. At that time, there were others prior to that, right? So that is why there's a disparity between what the Old Testament is driving at and what the New Testament is driving to.
By the way, sorry,
But
I have
that
to jump
doesn't
in. The YouTube stream just cut out.
Just cut out, or it says
Yeah.
it's live right now.
I'm getting reports that it's dead.
I'm watching
Oh,
it.
maybe
right
it
now.
came back. Yeah, okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it must be their connection.
So, I mean, what I'm driving at is this. In both accounts, Justin, the Jews of the ancient believed in God. They believed in, at first, to be honest, they believed in gods. And then we have this whole Abraham, we're going to, single, God. And this idea was, I think, more of a...
Yeah, but Saul, none of this
left
actually has anything to do with what we're talking about. You're trying to lay a foundation that the Bible has like multiple meanings. And I'm just simply asking you, what is the evidence that we can take a passage from the Bible and conclude that there are multiple meanings to it?
The evidence is the historicity and the development of the Bible itself, as you know. We know that the multiple authors through multiple times who had different agendas and different perspectives, that is the answer. And
That's
that's
not the
a
answer.
historical fact.
That's
It's
not. That's
Tell
not
me why.
even a historical fact. So that's not an answer to my question. What is the mechanism? What is the tool that allowed you to have the knowledge that the Bible has multiple meanings? When I read Matthew 16:27, how do I know that it means something other than what it actually says? And if it means something other than that, how do I know what the additional meaning is? Does God have to reveal the additional meaning to you?
There is a revelation involved, yes.
Okay, so the words in Matthew 16 don't mean what they actually mean. They mean what you think God revealed them to you in your private prayer time.
No, that you've already snuck in there actual meaning, as though there's an actual meaning and that now I'm changing it and sneaking something in. That's not the case. You're making a presupposition that your perspective is the actual meaning. And what evidence do you have for that?
I don't need evidence. We can read the passage, and every word in this passage has an intrinsic meaning. We know what the meanings of words are. When it says that some of you standing here, we know what that means. That's people standing there, the people he's talking to. When it says that some of you will not taste death, we know what that means. It means they're not going to taste death. Your goal here is to say the words on the page don't mean what the words on the page mean, and you're going to bend yourself into literal pretzels trying to make up reasons why words don't mean words.
No, I don't need to do that. All we have to do is take a look at the reality when it comes to the interpretation of Scripture and why there are so many. Because there isn't a univocal interpretive standard. So to say that is unfounded.
Okay,
Is
then
there-
tell me
isn't.
what these words
If
mean.
there
If
was, then we would all come to that, right?
If the words don't mean what the words mean, tell me what they actually mean.
No, I can tell you what it is that I interpret them to mean. I don't have a standard either to say that my interpretation is absolute. That's the point of what I'm trying to represent. That we're taking words and saying, look, this is what I see, and so therefore this is what it means, and so he's lying.
Yeah, but what do they mean?
This is
If
a
they don't
lie.
mean what they mean, what do they mean? Tell me.
I believe that we're talking about a death. We're talking about the soul. He emphasizes the internal value of the soul over worldly gain.
He didn't
Right?
say any of
For
that. He
what
says
will
some
it
of you
profit a
will
man? This
not
is the
taste death.
verses prior. I'm looking at the verses prior from 24 through 28, and it's the context. The context of what's being spoken here is that he's promising that the Son of Man is going to come to glory and repay each person according to their deeds.
Yep.
He concludes that some standing there will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. It's often interpreted as referring to the transfiguration, but it's also interpreted by many, of which I am one, that it is a condition of one's soul, that they're going to come into a revelation of Christ before there is a death that occurs in their soul. That's
the
the only
second
death
death.
that matters.
When is the second death according to the Bible?
The second death, in terms of what do you mean?
When does the Bible say the second death is going to happen? Because now you're saying it doesn't mean a physical death, it means the second death, the spiritual death. When does that happen according to the Bible?
No, I'm not. I'm saying that in this passage here, those that are standing there are not going to taste death before they see the Son of Man. What does it mean to see the Son of Man? Do you mean in the eschatological revelations, Christ coming down with the heavenly hosts?
Because that's what that's what the coming of the Son of Man is. He tells you on like a dozen occasions that when the Son of Man comes with his angels in the glory of his Father, that is the judgment.
It is, but I don't believe that this passage is discussing that.
Wait, it literally describes it in detail of him like coming down with like all the angels. I'm confused.
In this passage right here in 17, it's discussing how an individual there's rebuke and there's acceptance. This whole theme is not about the end. It's not an eschatological theme at all.
It quite literally is. It's talking about the judgment. In fact, the whole chapter is about end times. The whole chapter is about the heavenly reality. And this isn't the only time Jesus says this. He says it again in Matthew 24, verse 30, Matthew 24, 34. He says it again in Matthew 25, 31. He says that he's going to come with the glory of his Father and all the angels, and he's going to sit on the throne of judgment. We know what this image is. Coming with all the angels and judging mankind is the coming of the kingdom.
Oh,
It's my understanding that like the authors of these texts were pretty sure that the judgment was coming soon, which is why like under that position, this passage makes perfect sense, right? I mean, if you believe that the judgment is coming in 10 or 20 years, yeah, it's totally plausible that like some or even many of these apostles would have still been alive. I mean, but if that's not the case, if it didn't come soon, which it didn't, well then that just makes these people wrong.
That's a really good point. I mean, all of this is perfectly in line with the dialectical context of the time, which was apocalypticism. So it seems like the reasonable interpretation is just that this is an expression of the apocalypticism that was so prevalent at the time.
So, yes, and that is a fact. There's no question about that. And there was obvious reason for that, and many reasons for that in terms of how that was an advantage in a lot of political ways. And so having people believe that this is something that's happening soon, it adds urgency, it adds validity. It also is influential because these are things that reach into their prior beliefs and systems. So yes, there was coerciveness that was a part of these things. The authors that we obviously know, we don't know precisely. That would be to say, let's remove any intent from them and then assume, oh, well, this must have been really exactly what Christ has said. That would be cherry picking in and of itself. What can be said, that's why I'm saying that the interpretation, since we don't have any validity for it being literal, because if I were to say, oh, this is literal, it's absolutely the case, there's where the problem comes in. Then you're going to say, oh, well, what about all these things? We're talking donkeys, this and that, or,
exactly.
What do you mean?
Yeah, when we talk about how Jesus was a literal person saying literal words who literally died on a cross, you want to accept all the literal parts that you like. And then the minute we show you words of Jesus that you don't like, you jump automatically to, oh, those aren't actual literal words. Or he didn't actually mean those words. They must mean something else. So you're just lying to the audience. You're lying to yourself, and you're trying to do the gymnastics. And I think this leads to a broader point. And I want one of my audience members is sent me a message on this. Thank you, Aaron Leitz. Aaron says, also, thank you for the 666, Aaron. It says, Doug revealed to me in an esoteric way that Jesus is a false Christ. And I think this is very important because you've already come to the conclusion that the Bible is the esoteric, revealed information by God. But we have no reason to believe, even if you do accept that there's an esoteric path that God is giving you knowledge about, how did you come to the conclusion that it's through the Bible as opposed to the Quran or opposed to the writings in the Vedas?
Yeah, there's no exclusivity. Number one, I'm not making any. I don't need to try to manipulate the circumstance and say, oh, I'm going to say this is true, but not this. I'm saying blanketly that the interpretation from a spiritual perspective is the most important and key because of what you've said. At no point have I given any credence to the literalness at all. Christ, if the question is, do you believe that the man that is spoken about in the Synoptic Gospels is actually God incarnate? The answer is no, because what that means, the implications for that are well outside of the scope, that all reality came down and just into the form of a man and stopped, like that. It's inconsistent. The consistency would be that a person, us, people, men and women, certainly are the expression of the truth, the reality that is. And so
Jesus
all
was
of these
not
things
born in the
are
flesh?
Christ. Jesus is a representation, so far as esotericism is concerned.
No. Was he
You're
born in the
coming
flesh?
from a literalist.
Was he born in the flesh?
Why don't you, when you say, was he born in the flesh?
Was he an actual human being that had human flesh?
Was God an actual human being that had human flesh?
Jesus,
No.
the guy that, so John 1 is wrong when it says that the word was God, the word was with God, and so on and so forth, and then the word became flesh. That's not true.
What I'm saying is that in the word was God, and the word was with God, and the word became flesh.
Okay,
The
was Jesus the
interpretation-
word?
Jesus is the word. The question is, what is Jesus?
Did he have flesh?
No, not like that.
So John's
You're
wrong.
separating it. What's that?
So what is the flesh that the word became?
This is the issue I'm having. You are presupposing that you're already taking a narrative and saying, so why don't you tell me what it is that you see? What it sounds like is you're saying that you see that there's this guy sitting next to the throne.
I'm asking for your esoteric exegesis. John 1:14 says the word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. So what does it mean when it says that he became flesh?
What it means is that the reality is something that has phenomenality, that it expressed in our universe, in people, in all of these things, that it became the truth, that it says the God is spirit, and the spirit expresses itself, and this expression is the phenomenal reality that we know. Flesh is flesh? That's what it means by flesh.
Do spirits have flesh?
No.
Okay, so then what became flesh?
What became flesh?
Yeah, it says the word became flesh. What was the word and what did it become?
The word became flesh.
Yeah, what is the word?
The word is reality, the truth.
So the word isn't referring to Jesus here.
Jesus is the truth.
Is Jesus identical to truth?
He's the truth and the life, right? That's literally what he says.
Is Jesus identical to truth? When you say Jesus is truth, what
Yes.
sense of is? So Jesus is identical to truth.
Yes.
So when
Jesus
you
is
say
the
when you say
truth. When I
that's
say
the
the truth,
truth, all you're saying
uh-huh.
is that's the Jesus?
No. What I'm saying
If it's
is,
identical, then that would just necessarily follow.
I'm taking out the anthropomorphism. Jesus is not Jesus the truth. When we speak about the truth, that is not an anthropomorphic individual that walks around. The
So
truth is the
Jesus,
foundation of
is
the
he
things that we
identical to
use in order
truth
to
or
know
not?
what is reality.
So is he identical to truth or not?
I said yes.
Okay, so then he can be
Just
substituted. You can substitute truth for Jesus and Jesus for truth, and it wouldn't change the
Correct.
meaning of any sentence.
It wouldn't. No.
Yeah, so then when I say that's the truth, all I'm saying is that's the Jesus?
or you could talk about the Jesus tables for Boolean functions.
Yeah, or like the deflationary theory of Jesus?
Yeah.
You know that that's not the case. You're using it out of context. That doesn't make any sense.
What did John baptize in John chapter 1 when the word becomes flesh and then it appears to John the Baptist? What was he baptizing? Was he just dunking the truth underwater?
So again, all of those, what I'm saying is really simple. The stories are not about a literal man. It is the representation of us, of people, of men and women, of humans. That's the issue. That's
How
the
did you
difference.
come to the conclusion that the Bible is the source of esoteric truth and not the Quran?
I didn't say that the Quran didn't have any esoteric truth.
So if I go to the Quran and I find esoteric truth in it that contradicts the Bible, which one's right?
The only things in contradiction are things that are literals. There is no contradiction
Well,
when you
you
look
just
at
told me
it
Jesus
from an
was even
esoteric
a literal
perspective.
human being. Was Muhammad
The
a
Quran-
literal prophet? Did he marry a literal
We already,
6-year-old?
yeah, those things in regards to Muhammad, a prophet, that is something that we know to be a literal fact, a historical fact that
But
there was
Jesus
Muhammad.
is not a literal
did these
person.
things. Did someone say we know about the historicity of Muhammad and the historicity of the Quran. We don't have a direct historicity of any real solidity when it comes to the scriptures. We know that. We don't even know the authors, but they do. So there isn't any ambiguity when it comes to the Quran and its historicity. There is when it comes to Christianity because of this very fact that I'm saying.
So if the Quran is
Which is
literally true, then
used-
you should be converting to Islam because according to the Quran, the Bible has been hopelessly corrupted and the only real truth is in the Quran.
So the Quran, here's the thing that's interesting. The inner mysteries, Christ as a cosmic principle, the unity of spirit and matter, where they're one and the same, personal experience in the divine. These are the core principles of Christianity, esoteric Christianity. These are the things that you guys are not acknowledging. Oh, well, is spirit and matter? You're assuming that they're separate. They're not.
Do you
Well, did
acknowledge
Christ
that?
become?
Do you acknowledge that Doug is God?
Yes, I do.
Oh fuck, hell yeah! Praise,
Hey, let's go. Wait,
praise Doug.
do you acknowledge the truth of King Crab as being God?
Hell yeah!
Yeah, within the
Fuck
and
yeah.
I know what
Let's
you're doing
go.
because
Crustaceanist?
it's an argument of absurdity. Oh, so do you realize that that dog is God? Like, so you worship the dog? You worship the penguin? So the penguin created the universe then?
I said,
Like,
not
these
dog,
are
Doug.
absurdities.
Sound Doug out backwards for me. It's
I
dog, baby.
understand.
No, it's Goog.
I understand. I
Lich,
understand
you're
the
supposed to be
technique.
on my
but-
team. I don't know why you.
Sorry. It's I just like me some Gouda cheese. Okay.
But the point is that no, the ideas you guys are especially you guys definitely understand and are able to conceive the difference between saying there's a totality reality that has expressions infinitely. And the infinite expressions is not the totality of that reality, but it is in nature authentic. So
That just sounds like
is the
gibberish.
penguin God?
Yeah.
Sure.
So my
How
understanding
is that
is
gibberish?
everything that Saul
It's,
has
why
said
don't, no,
to
I
us
want to
here
go back. I
today
want him to defend that. I
is
want to
Yeah.
defend that because I don't
Yeah,
think
it's
I'd like to know.
it was just like a bunch of like words that have extremely unclear meaning. It was like continental philosophy at its peak.
Yeah. So listen, I've had my fill of word salad, and we have another guest in the wings if we want to bring in a new guest. But I want to make sure I understand to reduce all of the claims we've heard from Saul here. Is there's esoteric religious information, and you can only know it by it being revealed to you, which means everything you've ever said to us on this live so far, we just have to take your word for it that God revealed it to you, even though he didn't reveal it to us or anybody else. Am I capturing your position correctly, Saul?
No, not in the least. What I'm saying in short is that your interpretation of scripture from a literal perspective gives you the ability to twist and turn and invalidate because of the inconsistencies that are inherent in
I'm
such
not
How do you
twisting
know?
anything.
How do you know if something is literal or metaphorical?
The stuff he doesn't like is always a metaphor. We know
Is it
that
just
much.
vibes? If it has like the vibes of being a metaphor, it makes it a metaphor, and if it has the vibes of being literal, that makes it literal? Is that it?
No, not necessarily at all. It's not that.
Yeah, so
So
explain the
we're
process. So for any given passage, how do you know if it's literal or metaphorical?
So all of the passages, I'm saying the entirety of the New Testament is metaphorical. It is not considered literal. And the reason for that is because of the inconsistencies of the historicity and the inconsistencies of what a literal interpretation would entail.
So
So
because the Bible's inconsistent, it's a metaphor.
yeah, so quite literally, every part that is contradictory with other parts and with history, that stuff is metaphorical. It gains the status of metaphor as soon as it's proven to be wrong or inconsistent, and then everything that hasn't been proven to be that is literal.
Not at all. See, again, you assumed that it is literal and then had a person take it to be metaphorical because of some disposition that would work for them. That's not the case. What I'm saying is that no one on the panel can say that this is literal. There's nothing. You would have to just assume that. Is it literal, Ian? Do you have some evidence that says this is literal?
Well,
You already know that you don't believe it's literal.
here's the funny
So
thing,
that's
though.
easy.
If everything in the Bible's a metaphor, that means the meaning is completely subjective. It means whatever I want it to. So the minute
No,
you
it
go
doesn't. How is
to
that?
say
That
that the
doesn't
Bible
follow.
doesn't mean what it actually says in the literal sense, then you've made everything subjective. I can just make up my own religion based on a metaphorical reading of the Bible, and it means what I think it means.
Yeah, what's the metaphor?
Actually, no, that's quite inconsistent because that would assume that there are no principles that the interpretations would abide by, and that's
Well,
simply not the case.
What's
do
the
you,
metaphor?
yeah.
A
What's
metaphor
the
is
metaphor
comparing
for
two
what?
things without using like or as. What's the metaphor? What are the two things being compared?
I'm not understanding what you mean.
So a metaphor is comparing two things without using like or as. What's the metaphor? What are the two things being compared?
So the metaphor, the two things being compared is spirit and matter, as I said before.
So you're saying the Bible, the New Testament is a metaphor to compare spirit to matter?
We're talking about the material world and divine realities. So we're talking about an inner and an outer, an exoteric and an esoteric. That is consistent. We're talking about spiritual principles that would then underlie how one would engage that intellectually as well as within their life. What you guys are doing is you
So
are reducing everything down to a literal and saying, ha 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 ha, this is so absurd. But if we actually speak about it from a point of principles, and we actually take a look at it from, yes, a continental philosophical framework, which
ooh,
I don't
cringe.
believe is nonsensical. Yeah, that's fine. It's an opinion that you hold. I respect that. But I do hold that there's value there. Just because you don't hold value there, that doesn't substantiate any truths. It just means that you've expressed your opinion.
Yeah, I just like arguments. I think that you should be relying on arguments and logic in order to come to your conclusions, whereas Continental Phil seems to like gibberating and assertions.
Oh, I believe very much in first order logic and predicate logic. And I think in future discussion, I already know I have argument, syllogisms, modus ponens, modus tollens
Yeah, let's hear
that
'em.
very much lay out that these the validity of the argument. And I think in the future, it would be great to take a look at those because they're quite sound.
Why in the future? Let's do it now. What's the argument for God's existence? The syllogism.
So God's existence is based on
Can I get
the
premise one?
following. Yeah, P1. All things in all ways, under all conditions, in all circumstances, are expressions of relation, interrelation.
Okay. Premise two.
P2 is that interrelation is the essential fundamental element to all existence, and understanding of everything in every way, every concept, all experiences, and serves as an ontological premise.
Okay. Premise three.
P3 is that the interrelation, being that it's fundamental and underlying principles that govern and unifies all existence, that it is the most basic and essential aspect of reality universally. The conclusion, therefore, this interrelatedness, or I'm using the word interrelatedness because it's for unity. This unity or interrelatedness is the fundamental nature of reality. That's
Yeah,
God.
and what's the inference rule?
Yeah, this is a modus ponens.
It certainly is not a modus ponens. What do you think a modus ponens is?
Well, the modus ponens, what I've done is I've extended it. I know that it would be.
What do you think a
based
modus
on-
ponens? What is the modus ponens structure? Could you review that with us?
What is this about what I said?
Do you
that is
even know what
problematic
modus
here?
ponens? Because this is distinctly not a modus ponens argument.
I do have a modus ponens argument for it.
But I asked, so what's the inference rule for this argument, the one that you just gave?
So this wasn't a specific. This was just the premises that laid out for the modus ponens.
So what's the modus ponens?
So if the premise of reality is the nature of interrelatedness, then the minor premise is that interrelatedness is the underlying premise for all things that could be and the reasons for why all things are. And the conclusion, the consequent, would be that such a premise would universally serve as God.
Okay, so there's some logic problems here. So modus ponens is if X, then Y, X, therefore Y. Your premise one is an if X, and then your premise two is a therefore Y, and then your conclusion is like God exists. So you split your conditional down the middle, which means you actually don't follow modus ponens structure at all.
I did a major premise and the minor premise, and the
No, you
minor
didn't.
premise, I think I did.
I'm telling you, you didn't. So your major premise is going to be the if then. It's both of them. It's both the if and the then. And then your minor premise is the antecedent, the if, and then the conclusion is the consequent.
That's correct.
But that's not what
So
you
my
gave.
minor premise. What did you see as the second premise that I gave?
Oh, I have the first premise, and then I only have the word then for the second one, because I was so baffled that you split your conditional in half.
If interrelatedness is the most basic and essential aspect of the reality,
Yep,
and interrelatedness is equivalent to fundamental nature,
yep.
then the fundamental nature is the most basic and essential aspect of reality.
Then fundamental
The
nature,
conclusion. Yes.
the most.
I mean, that isn't modus ponens. That is a valid logical form. but it's not modus ponens. It's transitivity of, I don't know what the Latin name for it is, but it's transitivity of a conditional.
So wait, what is that? What's the structure of that?
It's if B then C, if A then B, therefore if A then C. That's what's being done here.
That's fine, but it seems like I only have one if statement.
Yeah, if interrelatedness is the most basic and essential aspect. And then, I mean, I can revise it, but I think that it's still quite valid. That I'm saying that if interrelatedness is the most basic and essential aspect of reality, then and interrelatedness is equivalent to this fundamental nature.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. The logical structure I gave was incorrect. The structure of the argument that's being given is if A then C, A is equal to B, therefore if B then C.
Wait, I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Fundamental nature is the most
So
basic and
it's if A is equal to C, or if A then C, premise 2,
so
A is
implies
equal
C.
to B.
A is equal to B. Therefore, B
conclusion.
implies C?
Right. That's the
Okay.
argument that's being presented right now.
Okay, sure. Yeah, what is the A implies C is if the premise of reality is the nature of interconnectedness, then
most basic and essential aspect of if interrelatedness is the most basic and essential aspect of reality, and interrelatedness is equivalent to fundamental nature, then fundamental nature is the most basic and essential aspect of reality.
okay, wait. So then the second premise, what's the A is B?
So interrelatedness is
Wait, because the conclusion to this is another conditional, so this couldn't possibly be, therefore God is real, because the conclusion is going to have the structure of B implies C. So that doesn't get you to the existence of God regardless of what the argument is.
Well, it does. What's the definition that I'm using for God is fundamental nature.
Yeah, with like one with a mind, so you can't get to the premise, the proposition that therefore God exists if your conclusion is not a singular proposition but is rather a conditional.
In this case, it's conditional, yes, because we're talking about something that has no other premise in order to substantiate it. We're talking
Yes,
about the
gotcha.
premises
So then
of
you can't
premises.
infer the consequence. So then you can't infer that God exists.
I disagree. Of course we can.
One of your
Why would you say
premises would have to be the supposition of the conditional, right? If you have a conclusion that's of the form A implies B, then in order to determine that B is true, you need to assume or suppose that A is true.
Right. And yes, that's exactly the case. It has to be implied. There's nothing else to substantiate it. There's nothing
Right.
else
But the point is the argument that you're presenting, the conclusion of your argument is a conditional, which doesn't get you to an actual existence of some object or some predicate, right? The goal is to conclude that C exists or that C is true, but the conclusion of the argument you're presenting is just that if A is true, then C is true. But we have no reason to accept that A is true. That's not part of the argument that you presented. I think it's important, though, that we back up, because it sounds like the argument that you're presenting is trying to be a teleological argument, which is roughly equivalent to the universe appears in, or if the universe is intentional, then there is an intender. Premise 2, the universe is intentional, therefore, premise 3, there is an intender. It seems like the argument that you're making is essentially a recasting, or dare I say, a tossed salad version of that argument. Ian, you are currently muted, by the way.
On where?
Oh no, now I can hear you. Never mind.
I think it's okay.
Yeah, okay, you're good.
Also,
Yeah.
I'm getting some messages about the moderators. I don't know if they're on TikTok or YouTube, but mods, you don't have to like mute or ban anybody unless they're doing something that's going to get our live taken down. Don't worry about it. They can yell at us. They can call me names and they can say that we're stupid. We don't really care. We're okay with all that.
So Placid, am I correct in saying that your argument is essentially, if the universe is intended, then there is an intender? Premise 2, the universe is intended. Premise or conclusion,
No.
therefore there is an intender? No? Okay. Because that was the argument that you
The
came
reason
in
why
with.
is because, the premises that I laid out. Premise 1 is that all things, in all ways, under all conditions, are expressions of interrelation. It's not about creation. This is just a brute fact. So I would ask, is that not a fact?
I mean, you would have to
Is there
defend
anything?
the premise, right?
Right, well, I'm asking. I'm attempting to do that. Is there anyone here on the panel that can give me an example of anything that is not
This is
predicated
burden
on an
shifting.
interrelation?
That's burden shifting. Saying this
no,
principle is true because
I'm
none of you
saying-
can disprove it is shifting the burden of proof.
No. I'm saying. Well, what I'm saying is I'm making a direct proposition, and the proposition that I'm making is that all things in all ways, under all conditions, in all circumstances, under all perceptions, are expressions of interrelation. And I'm saying that the reason that I hold that premise to be sound is because I see that to be supported under all conditions, in all ways, under all considerations.
Okay, so I mean, I see it to be sound that under all conditions and in all ways, that all minds necessarily have bodies. So therefore, I could conclude based on that, your same logic that God doesn't exist.
No, because you're saying that all things have bodies, and so
All
then
minds
you're just
have
saying
bodies.
that all minds have bodies, right? So that's just saying this is my perspective of that, but I can say no. There are minds that don't have bodies, and we can define mind and say computer systems or AI has mind. and it
AI does
doesn't
not have
body.
mind.
Again, that's a different argument. We
Well,
have
maybe
to
it does,
define
maybe
mind.
it doesn't. The point is that the parity argument that Ian is presenting is roughly that if your argument is along the lines of, well, I don't see any reason to think it's false, then Ian's argument is, I don't see any reason to think it's false that all minds have bodies. And so, in absence of a symmetry breaker, i.e., if you can demonstrate that the thing that you believe is true is actually true by providing an affirmative defense, or by eliminating all possible counterexamples, then it seems that this is just an argument from intuition, essentially.
So you're saying that, if I'm understanding, that I would need to defend premise 1 using what would satisfy as an adequate validation for premise 1?
That's your job, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can make logical arguments. You could provide another set of logical arguments, or you could provide evidence to the claim, like some sort of that contradictory claims lead to some other contradiction. Like, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you could do it.
Yeah, so I'm saying that I literally, okay. So fundamental nature, if fundamental nature is not interrelated, then reality cannot exist as a coherent whole, because it would lack connections, relationships, and unifying principles. So when I look at it from that perspective, I'm saying that,
I'm just curious. So I just have a question about the terminology that's being used here. So when you say interconnected, in what sense do you mean? Because there are certainly things in our universe that are not connected with other things in our universe in any sense of the word. Like, they can have no causal influence on each other, etc. So I'm just curious what you mean by interconnected or interrelated.
Well, give me an example of something that has no relation. When I say interrelated, that there's a relation to something in order for it to have an ontological basis. Like, we're saying that there's
Do you mean
something
interrelated with everything, or interrelated with at least one other thing?
Interrelated with something. Interrelation is the basis. So if we're saying, oh, there's nothing, let's just say, oh, well, there's nothing at all. Okay, nothingness. So in order for there to be this absence, there has to be, it is the acknowledgement of a presence of something. So we're saying that in terms of concept alone, just nothingness, cool. So no thingness, so there must be a thing in order to establish the absence of that. There's a relation there.
What's the absence of God?
So in terms of how the absence of God, there is not an absence of absence. There's no absence of God.
Oh, so then
If
not
God is
everything
if
is
God is the
necessarily
absolute-
interrelated insofar as you would be positing that everything necessarily that in order to have a presence you need to have a lack, but there isn't a lack of God, therefore there cannot be a presence of God. So based on that standard alone, we would conclude that God doesn't exist.
And that would be correct, because God would not exist in that regard. It wouldn't.
W concession?
No, it means that what you're saying, I understand what you mean, and there is a lot that is logical. But if you understand what that would imply, where I'm coming from, if you're saying like, what I'm saying is that the premise, since God in this regard is saying it's a fundamental nature of all things, right? Then to say you're talking about presence as a thing, as an object or a concept. So God wouldn't be a present object or concept, but the foundation for such a thing. So yes, God wouldn't exist in that context. This is not a physical thing.
I think it's important to recognize that, like, even if we grant this idea that like all physical whatevers are interconnected in some way, that's consistent with a naturalist worldview. So I just don't see how you use, like, even if we grant this premise, which I'm not sure if it's true, but like maybe it is. I'm not sure how you use that to conclude that there exists a God.
Well, again, it's about the definitions. So in definition, if we're saying, look, interrelatedness encompasses everything, like it's constituting the fundamental connections, relations between all things, concepts, experiences, ontologies, interrelatedness, right? If I'm saying, what does it mean? Well, what do you mean? Fundamental nature. It refers to this essential and aspect of reality that governs and unifies all of the existing things.
It might be the case that nature is described, that the ontology of nature of like a natural world is ontologically relational. But again, that doesn't get you to a mind, right?
Yeah.
So okay. Now you are bringing up something that is, yes, very valid in regards to, well, the aspects, mind. So that would also need to be defined. Well, when we say mind, generally what that means for us is that we're looking at some type of a psychological state, or in more specific terms, some type of neurobiological condition that then we could call some psychological state, like of the brain. But that is not a full scope of mind. When I say mind, I'm not talking about a neurobiological system in order to express awareness, reason, and intent.
Well, right, but you're assuming intent. That's the important piece. You're assuming that there is intent. You're assuming that there is awareness. I forgot the third thing, and that's the clear, like, this is why I was saying that your argument is essentially the universe has intention, therefore there is an intent.
No. That's why I'm very specific in the language. Those things are possessive, right? Fundamental nature doesn't possess the very thing that it defines, any more so than direction is sitting in a specific
I wasn't talking
location.
about the fundamental nature. I was talking about the observed nature that we see. Because the inference that you're making is that there is an observed nature. In the observed nature, there is intent. Therefore, the fundamental nature possesses intent.
No, I'm saying I'm saying it in reverse. I'm saying that because there's fundamental nature that serves and governs all things, that in and of itself is why there would be intent. So there has to be some ground. I'm sorry?
How do you conclude that because there is a fundamental nature to reality, that there is intent? How does that follow from the existence of a fundamental nature?
Yeah, by what we observe. So I know, so we're observing, we would say that a human being has intent.
Sure.
We would say that the intent, we can go back and say, well, what is intent, blah, blah, blah. It's all of these things that has to do with a variety of different functions of this, that, and the other thing, okay? Great. Ultimately, when we're talking about the neurobiology, when we're talking about sociology, psychology, the dispositions of the person's experience, all these things that add up, we would say those are the things that are leading to this. But in and of itself, those are just things that are coming together in aggregate in order to produce or express.
I'm just gonna cut you short. Not because I know all this, but like that's great about the neurobiology. For the sake of argument, we're granting that you can even have a mind without neurobiology. How do you then get from our observations actually have intent? Because you said that the way that we know that the existence of a fundamental reality implies the existence of intent, you said from our observation. So what about our observations gets us to be able to conclude that if fundamental reality, therefore intent?
And before you
I'm
answer,
saying that
Saul,
we
let me interject. I need to make an announcement real quick. I'm really sorry. There's people that still keep trying to join the discussion on TikTok. Guys, if you want to join the discussion and debate after Saul, you have to go to this channel here, the Unapologetic live show on YouTube. And in the description, you'll see a link to join the discussion. We're not taking guests over TikTok. I know there's some people that really want to get in, but we can't stream on all these platforms and take guests from TikTok. We have to take guests from a third party. So go to the YouTube stream and hit the link in the description of the video. Sorry, Saul.
Alternatively, the URL, if you want to get there directly without going to YouTube, it's just tinyurl.com/UA guest. That's all it is.
Yeah, I'll put it in the
but
chat.
anyway, we're saying Saul.
So I'm trying to make it simplified. We observe in human beings intention. And the bottom,
yes.
And I'm saying that this idea of the fundamental nature is the absolute grounding as to the origin of such a thing. That
are you so I'm just trying to understand. Are you saying because humans have intention, there must be like the universe as a whole, all of reality must have intention? Is that the claim?
Oh no.
Okay, then I'm not understanding what you're saying.
I'm not saying that, because I'm saying we're talking about God, and I'm saying I'm defining God as the fundamental nature, and I'm saying
right. That's fine. But in
right.
order to be a mind, it has to have things like intention and will, and all these things. So I'm just asking, how do you determine that there is intention in the universe?
I'm saying, but you're saying that's not what I'm saying. God is. You're saying that God must have intention in that way in order for it to be God.
Those were your words, right?
No. My words were that intention is something that is a derivative of the fundamental nature.
Wait,
okay.
Wait. So does God have intentional states?
No, God wouldn't possess any of the attributes.
So God doesn't love?
So God, at this level, at the most absolute and would not love as an extent, but would be the fundamental nature of love. That's why I'm saying that's the argument. That the fundamental nature of all things, God is the fundamental nature of all things. So that would mean what's love? God would be the fundamental nature and origin of love.
Is God identical to love? Is God identical to love? I'm sorry.
Identical to love?
In the same way that Clark Kent is identical to Superman.
Yeah.
I understand. So no, I would have to say no, wouldn't be identical, because I know what that means to you. It would mean sort of expression. And the answer is no. Oh, so wouldn't God, so it anthropomorphizes it, and the answer would be no. So it would be the foundation of love.
So you're saying that God, okay, so maybe I should just ask this question just directly. Do you think that there is intention
to physical reality?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Why do you think that?
I believe that is the case because of what intention means. I believe that the definition of intent is not, it goes beyond a psychological state.
Well, I mean,
And
so
so
like
I'm
what?
saying-
So perhaps this would help guide the question better. How could you tell the difference between a universe that has intention and a universe that doesn't have intention?
So I would say that there would be no way to make a differentiator between a universe that has or hasn't if we're coming from that perspective, because that would mean that intention.
So then you're an
is
agnostic.
something that- No. Let me explain. So I did a paper, and the paper was about. Damn it! My phone is going to die right now. Hold on a second.
Yeah, your phone indicator on our live stream says you've got 1% battery left, by the way. So.
Oh no. Oh wait, there was a no. No, we're actually chilling.
We.
Well, I mean, while we're waiting for the guest to return, make sure you're double tapping on that screen. Make sure you're dashing that like and subscribe button against the rocks.
Make sure that you're damning that bell notification thing straight to hell. In fact, Placid, I know that this is cutting it off, but it seems like actually a fairly good stopping point, if only because your phone is currently dying, and we've currently had you on for about an hour. So feel free to come back on at a later date, but we are going to move on to another guest if the rest of the panel is okay with that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Fair enough. I appreciate you guys taking the time to speak.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Take care, and
Yeah,
feel
appreciate
free to come back on whenever.
Good to hear from you, Saul. All right. We had a guest in the queue, and they're trying to get their
We currently do.
Yeah, trying to get their screen
Marlin?
working properly. Yeah. Is it Marlin?
Yeah, am I audible?
You are audible.
Yes, you are.
Great.
Do you want to turn your camera on or no?
I would prefer not to.
Okay.
You don't have to. Okay, just a second. Well, everyone can hear you, right? If you're in the YouTube stream or if you're in the TikTok stream, let us know if you can hear Marlin. Because we can hear you. I think so. You should be good.
TikTok can hear.
Yep, TikTok can hear. Put a yes in the chat if you can hear Marlin on YouTube, guys. Marlin, can you introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, sure.
We're good on YouTube, by the way.
Yeah, I'm 21. I mean, I don't know what you would like to hear.
Good
What
enough.
religion are you?
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah,
believe?
so I'm not an atheist because I'm not a reductive materialist. So I don't believe that everything is reducible to its constituent elements.
I'm sorry,
the
Marlin,
thing-
before you continue, I do have to, I think some of us might have some gifts to shout out that we were supposed to do before we brought you on.
Sure.
I just want to thank Aaron and Robert for the $5 and $3 respectively.
Yeah, I want to thank, I'd love to thank Aaron for the $6.66. Hail, Aaron. Hail, 666. And a huge hail, Satan. Big W to Aaron. And Robert, thank you so much for the $3. I always appreciate it. Thank you so much, both of you.
And special announcement too. If guys don't know yet, on the TikTok stream, you see a purple box. It says AU in the box. That is our TikTok account for the Unapologetic live stream. We can't stream to it yet because the account's not old enough. But please follow the account and support us there because eventually, when our account is, I think, 30 or 60 days old, we can start going live on it using TikTok Studio. And then we'll be using that as our main platform rather than streaming through here, through my account. But guys, thank you so much for being here.
Yep.
All right, well, let's proceed. Marlin?
Yeah, so I'm not an atheist because I'm not a reductive materialist. I don't believe that everything is reducible to its constituent elements. If a thing were just, the sum of its parts, then those parts would also just be the sum of their parts, and you get an infinite regress. So everything collapses into, infinite multiplicity. If you take reductive materialism to its logical conclusion, then you just argue everything out of existence. So as far as I can tell, it's not a credible position. This flat ontology it just can't account for anything. Why does the chair not bleed into its surroundings? Why does it not collapse into infinite parts? Why are those parts not completely subsumed into the whole? How is it one and many at the same time?
So to be clear, atheism doesn't entail reductive materialism. Second, reductive materialism doesn't have to have an infinite regress of smaller and smaller parts. You can have simples at the bottom, and then you just have no issue with collapsing into infinite parts or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that, about simples at the bottom. And, you might, as an atheist, you might disagree on a propositional level about reductive materialism, but even then I think it's a performative contradiction. Atheists say stuff like, love is a biochemical reaction, or, human beings are meat sacks. I mean, those are pretty common sentiments.
Wait, and I'm sorry, the terminology performative contradiction is a bit confusing to me. I take a contradiction to be some sort of relation between two propositions. Do you think performances have a propositional value to them?
Oh, I believe that performative contradictions are just as problematic as propositional contradictions.
But do you think like actions have a propositional value, like a true-false value attached to them?
I believe that actions can be true or false, yes.
So when I eat a hamburger, is that true or false?
Well, you can eat it in a way that makes sense and in a way that doesn't make sense, sure.
When I eat a hamburger, is it true or false?
Well, there's a teleology behind the act of eating a hamburger.
You said actions are true or false? Is eating a hamburger true or false?
You can either accomplish the telos of that action or you can't, and in that sense it can be true or false, yes.
Is it true or false? If I eat a hamburger, is it true or is it false?
Okay, we're already getting bogged down. Maybe I should, elaborate on my argument a bit before we,
So, just to be clear for everybody watching, performative contradiction is the kind of word that people use when they're trying to say, oh, atheists actually don't believe what they're saying they believe, they just say it for XYZ reasons. That's what's happening here. So we can skip past that rhetoric, and we can just move on to the position that you're trying to put forward here.
Yeah, I think that would be best. That would be best, yeah. So, I'm sure you would all agree that we have to regard some things as more important than others because, there's an infinite amount of information. And so, we can only view the world through the prism of our own relevance realization, which means that every act of perception is also a value judgment. We frame reality in accordance with our aim. So, the chair is something I can sit on, the glass is something I can drink out of. Even scientific experiments have to be framed by a purpose. So categories of being are inherently teleological.
Marlin, can I ask a quick question? So you said that you're not an atheist. Are you a theist of some kind, a deist of some kind, pantheist,
yes, I should have prefaced that. Yeah, I'm a theist.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. Like classical theist, like triomni theist, or some other variant?
Yeah, I guess I'm an Orthodox Christian.
Okay. It's just helpful for framing the conversation. That's all. Thank you. Continue.
Of course. Yes. So the constituent elements of the chair are bound together by a purpose, and that purpose is also its essence. I would conflate those concepts. And that essence is manifest in the parts, but it's not reducible to them. Or here's another way to think about it. You can only encounter aspects of the chair, but of course there has to be a through line that unites all of those aspects. And that through line cannot itself be another aspect. It has to transcend them. And you can even apply this to the human person. It's like I can look at a picture of my 5-year-old self and I can identify with it, which is quite remarkable considering that, like the ship of Theseus, all my parts have been replaced multiple times over since I was 5 years old. So the continuity of my identity is not reducible to my parts. It has to transcend them.
Is telos present in everything?
Yes, I believe that being has a teleology.
Gotcha.
Sure.
What's the telos of a kid having cancer?
Well, there's a falling away from, the telos of a being, and a sickness would be a falling away.
So it's a dystelos.
Yes, it's a falling away from. Yeah, I mean, it's when you're sick. That's the dissolution of your being. So it's the falling away from your teleology. Yeah, sure.
So how can that be the case when God is the one who gave us the anatomy that causes cancer in the first place? This is a dystelos that God himself gave, which means that presumably it would be teleological.
Yes. I'm sorry, English is not my first language, so I will
Yeah.
need a second to formulate
fine.
my thoughts on this. Yes. Uh, well, I guess this has to do with, just the basic finitude of things.
How do you mean?
Well, so, in Christian theology, you have, this basic disconnect between, a paradisal state and the world of the fall. So, things as they ought to be and things as they actually are. And there's a disconnect, and, Christian theology accounts for that disconnect.
Oh, sure, but what Christian theology doesn't account for is the facts of reality. We know that dinosaurs had cancer millions of years before humans even existed, which means that cancer existed, this teleological state existed millions of years before the fall of man, which means that these appeals to a fallen world just don't make any sense at all.
Yeah. Yes, listen, we, neither of us should underestimate, like, the difference between our respective worldviews. Like, we operate in completely different paradigms, and so if we want to establish mutual intelligibility, we have to start with first principles.
Marlin,
Because-
do you think that the Earth is less than 10,000 years old?
Again, I could
Yes.
not answer that question to you in a way that would make sense to you.
I mean, I mean, and I'm not asking this to to mock or anything. I just have to establish where we are as far as like worldviews, how much they disagree, right? So, like, for example, the sun rises every day. It has for as long as humans have been around. Mm-hmm. How many times do you think the sun has risen over the Earth? Do you think because that's just some number that in principle one could know?
Okay.
I think it's on the order of more than, say, a billion. And do you think it's less than a billion or more than a billion?
Okay, I think I have an answer to that question. So, I can exemplify this. So, like, I believe that the Earth is round. When you take this alienated perspective from nowhere, then the Earth is of course round. But when you take a phenomenological approach to things, when you just stand out on an open field, then you have a disk and a dome, and the sun rises in the east and goes down in the west, and
so I wasn't asking about the shape of the Earth. I know where you're going with this,
I know.
There's no room for disagreement over how many times the sun has risen.
Okay, right? I will just concede your point. Like, of course, like, from a scientific perspective, I agree with your position. It's like, of course, the Earth is not as old as much older than it says in the Bible.
Okay. I mean, look, I'm not going to say but your Bible said like I just wanted to establish ground rules. Because
sure, of course.
If you disagree with that, then Ian's argument has less force. If you agree that the Earth is quite old, then there were dinosaurs that predated humans, which means that you now have to explain the presence of sarcomas, osteosarcomas. These are bone cancers found on dinosaurs before humans could have ever fallen, because this was before humans could have even existed.
Yes. Yeah, what I was trying to do with the shape of the Earth is delineate the difference between this alienated scientific perspective and a more grounded phenomenological approach, because I believe in the primacy of human experience. So I in a sense I'm kind of a flat earther, if you want, and
don't do that to me.
Yeah, well, and so I believe that human experience is primary, and that that everything else is that those are abstractions, and they are actually secondary to human experience. So the Earth is round in a scientific sense, and so when you want to calculate artillery fire or send rockets into space, then that's a very useful abstraction, but it's nonetheless an abstraction, and it is secondary to human experience.
So Do you think that there exists an external world independent of the human experience?
Man, let me think about that for a second.
I mean, just because just to be clear, the Bible, Genesis 1, specifically lays out that there exists such a thing. Because, I mean, in Genesis 1, if you even take it even remotely seriously, not just that it's just completely fabricated, there are things that predate man.
Of
right?
course, but
even in a biblical sense, right?
Yes, but it also says that, you know, Christ is the lamb that was slain before creation. So, you know, the world has the shape of the God-man according to the Bible. So, like this stuff, you know, I'm really not trying to be obtuse. You know, I hope I don't come across that way.
No, you're
But,
being
you
very
know,
kind.
Yeah.
I guess I just feel like none of the questions. I'm confused as to what the answer is to the questions. I mean, how old do you think the Earth is?
Well, again, I delineated the difference between a phenomenological perspective.
Can I get like a number of years?
Well, I mean, how old do you believe that the world is?
4.5 billion, roughly.
Yeah, then I'll just agree with your perspective.
Sure.
From a scientific viewpoint, that's the correct answer. But when you take an embodied phenomenological view of things, then the age that's in the Bible is a lot more appropriate. Like our memory doesn't really go past that point. No.
So you would be saying both that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old and also that the Earth is like 10,000 years old?
Yeah, sure. I'm not going to put a precise number on it.
Well,
Okay.
okay, so the question is...
Then we have a contradiction.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing.
Well, listen, like in the Middle Ages, people knew that the Earth was round, right? Like they knew that since antiquity.
Yes.
But at the same time, in medieval cosmology and in medieval iconography, the Earth is often depicted as a sphere. So, is that
Wait.
also a?
You just said the same thing twice.
Yeah.
So medieval artists absolutely knew the Earth was a globe.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, as a disc. I'm sorry.
But also they painted it as a globe, right?
Yeah, they did sometimes, but sometimes they also portrayed it as a disc.
It's important to remember too that the medieval thought on the shape of the Earth is not univocal. It's not like everybody in the medieval period believed the shape of the Earth was a particular
nothing
thing.
about the Middle Ages is univocal.
Right. We don't even have that now. There are people now that believe the Earth is flat.
Even though, and I'll say it again, there are flat earthers in Antarctica currently watching a 24-hour sun, just for anybody watching. So the reason we got here regarding the age of the Earth is because it seems like you agree that there existed animals before the first human walked the Earth. Do you think that that's true?
Oh my, well, see, I believe that naming is an important part of the ontology of something. So unless Adam is there to name the animals, then the ontological status is kind of wobbly.
I mean, could be wrong here, but I don't think that naming grants ontology, right?
Well, again, let's take the example of the chair, right? Like, you should not take even ordinary objects for granted. I mean, I'm repeating myself, but like, why does the chair not bleed into its surroundings? Why does it not collapse into infinite parts?
I mean,
Why
I
are
can give
those
you
parts-
answers to those. You just might not like them.
No, I'm curious. No, please.
I mean,
share.
there are forces. There are forces at play that govern the behavior of matter, right? It has nothing to do with like whether it's been named, right? There are forces at play that allow us to delineate, right? We can talk about differences in we can delineate via things like density of matter, for example. So there's more dense matter in one place where a chair is, and there's less dense matter in places where there isn't a chair, for example.
That's true, but aren't there like infinite amounts of those differences?
No.
Yeah, but like there are many of them, right? And
Yeah, lots.
you care about some, and you don't care about others.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I mean. That's why that answer doesn't satisfy me.
I mean, when you say bleed into the surroundings, I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean like literally, like physically fall apart, or do you mean Like, why do we see the chair as a separate object from the air around it or something?
Yes, like, is it obvious to you, where
Well,
one
so-
object begins and another ends?
I lean towards mereological nihilism anyway. I don't know where my compatriots lean, but yeah, I don't think that there is like a fundamental ontology of chairness. But Platonists might disagree. Mereological positivists, if that's a word, might disagree. But regardless, like the point is that we have descriptions of things that behave in certain ways, and whether, at least under my view, whether we call this a chair, whether we call this particular atoms a chair or not is irrelevant. That's just a convention.
Yeah, well, see, I believe that multiplicity, or you could, use potential, to follow Aristotle, it has to be constrained, it has to be informed by a pattern in order for things to come into being. So the constituent elements of the chair have to be bound by something in order for it to exist. By a
Wait,
name,
so-
by a purpose, by an essence.
Well, so first of all, that's not true, right? So let's say that I'm like just randomizing atoms in like a big, I don't know, let's call it like 2 meters by 2 meters, just randomizing atoms, and then it pops up randomly as like an atom for atom perfect chair. Would that not be a chair?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, let's say I'm like randomizing atoms, like I'm creating like I have like a 2 meter grid, and I'm just randomly placing atoms into configurations, and I do it for long enough that eventually one of the randomized combinations is that of a chair. It just appears perfectly atom for atom as a chair because I'm randomizing atoms. Would that not be a chair because there was no telos there?
Well, again, I don't believe that the chair exists at the level of its constituent elements.
But would there be a chair there?
Well, is there, like, are there people to observe the chair? Is there, like, some
There wasn't
form
a
of intelligence?
telos. There was no purpose. I wasn't purposely trying to construct a chair. I was just randomizing atoms, and then these random atoms eventually took shape of a chair.
And, like, are there human beings that can recognize the chair as a chair?
I'm just asking you if you think that this would be a chair.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand your hypothetical. Like, are there, like, is there, like, human beings present who can...
Well, I mean, if I saw something that looked like a chair, I would probably say, wow, a chair.
Yeah, so would I.
Okay, cool. So then we can have a chair without a telos, without the chair telos.
No, but when you perceive the chair as a chair, it immediately, it gets a telos. Because
So-
you see the chair as something that you can sit on. That's
Sure.
like, essential to the definition of a chair.
Gotcha. So then you would agree then that you can make something without any telos, that whether something is a chair or isn't a chair doesn't depend on like a purpose that it was created for.
No, the telos pre-exists the creation of anything. Like, especially when we talk about human making, it's like you need a blueprint before you can build a house.
So can you have a chair that wasn't made to be a chair?
Well, you can appropriate objects for all types of different purposes.
Oh,
Does it
sure.
stop
And then
being a
it's
chair?
Well, objects are suited for many different purposes, but there's a hierarchy to it. So they are better suited for some purposes than for others, and they are not at all suited for, other purposes. So there's a hierarchy to it.
Let me give an example, just because maybe this will clarify my confusion here. So there's a statue. Is it outside of Vienna? It might be outside of Vienna. Where it's just a giant chair just out in a field. It's a statue. It's a piece of art. It's like, I don't know, 20 meters tall or something like that, maybe 10 meters tall. Very, very big chair. It's obviously a chair, not designed for sitting though.
Yes.
So why is it a chair?
Well, I mean, there are also, chairs in literature. Like there are chairs in Shakespeare, and you can't sit on those either.
So what makes a thing a chair?
Well, there are like, well, the telos makes a chair.
What's the telos of the statue? of
Well,
the,
yeah,
piece of art.
yeah, but that is derivative of the chair. It is a depiction.
Is it a chair?
Like a chair. It is a depiction of a chair.
Is it a
like
So
chair?
if
a
you,
chair.
so
Like a chair in
I would
Shakespeare.
call if you had a painting of a chair, I wouldn't call the painting a chair. I would call it a painting,
Sure.
right? And so is the statue, this piece of art, is it a chair?
Again, I would call it a depiction of a chair.
Okay.
So it's
so under your worldview, this enormous chair, not a chair,
well, not
even
a
though
chair.
it's an enormous chair.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not fit for human use, right?
No, it's absolutely not. I mean, I suppose in principle you could climb onto it, but that would be closer to a tree, right?
Well, I mean, maybe it is a chair. Yeah, maybe it's not just a depiction of a chair. Sure.
Well, if it is a chair, but it's not intended for human use, what's the telos required for a chair?
Well, then it's a chair for a statue. So there you go.
What's a chair for a statue? Is that different from a chair?
But it's still for
Is that
sitting,
different from
right?
some other thing?
It's still for sitting.
Well, no. I mean, it's not intended. Like, I mean, the sculptor did not intend for it to be sat on.
Yeah,
that
this
way.
is kind of a limit case because like a statue, is a depiction of something else. So it's
Yep.
kind of derivative of what it is depicting. Like, listen, I'm not entirely sure about this myself.
This is actually this is actually an interesting point in like mereology and in ontology. Like, what are statues? Like there's this, and I'm sure Ian knows about this. Like this whole question of like the clay sculpture. Is it a sculpture? Is it still clay? When does the clay become the sculpture? You're familiar with this thought experiment, I imagine.
I mean, I think all this stuff is. I think that this is all probably just a verbal dispute, so I skip most of this. But yeah,
It's just something that's been mentioned in the literature. But suffice it to say, I mean, like this is all to say that like it seems like telos isn't the thing that isn't like necessary for like a chair to exist. Like if you want to like.
No, listen, I would contend that it is, especially in the case of like purposeful objects that are man-made. They like an instrument. Yeah, like a telos is essential to the ontology of an instrument. I don't see how you could argue otherwise.
Could you tell me what the telos is of like a black hole 20 billion light years away?
Listen, I don't understand black holes. Don't ask me questions.
Okay, how about the telos of a crystal growing in some random cave that has never had humans in it?
Well, let's see. Well, yes, naturally, the further you get from the world of human experience, the more difficult it becomes to assign teleology to objects. I will concede that.
And that's because it's actually not evident at all that the natural world has a telos whatsoever, which is the claim that you must defend, right? I mean, clearly in human experience, yeah, lots of things have telos because humans have intention and we build things with intention.
Yes, but remember.
But your claim is that the universe as a whole has that, not just human-built things.
But you have to remember, I have a phenomenological approach to things. Like, I believe that human experience is primary, and I, as a Christian, I believe that Christ is the Lamb that was slain before the foundation of the world. So I believe that the world has the shape of the God-man. So.
How do you conclude that I'm not a philosophical zombie under your worldview?
Can you explain that term for me? I'm not familiar with
that I'm not just a robot who doesn't actually have an internal view. Because you're asserting the primacy of human experience.
Yeah, but not of subjectivity. Not of subjectivity.
No. Sorry, I'm just trying to understand why you don't assert the primacy of your own experience. Why is it the entirety of human experience?
Well, I certainly hope that I'm not a solipsist.
I'm asking how you get out of that under your worldview. Like how can you justify caring about my experience?
Can you make an accusation first so that I can defend my position? That would be helpful, I think.
Yeah. So why
Just
are you
accuse me of being
defending?
a solipsist.
No. Sorry, I'm not. Well, I mean, I don't know if you're a solipsist.
I'm asking for it.
I imagine you're not a solipsist. I'm asking why you're not a solipsist under your worldview.
yeah. What justifies you not reaching like the skeptical hypothesis?
Well, again, because I'm not making the argument that the world is grounded in my subjective experience. I'm making the argument that it's grounded in the God-man.
Okay, wait. Do you think that God has like higher reasons to do things?
Well, yeah, he's the source of higher reasons, sure.
Yeah, sure. So how do you know that God isn't deceiving you about all of reality for reasons that are higher than your understanding?
Yeah, well, in that case, knowledge is impossible, and this
Yeah.
conversation is futile. So we
Well,
can
yeah,
move
like
on.
external knowledge about the external world. Yeah. So
Yeah, so let's move
you
on.
are agnostic as to whether or not reality exists at all?
Yeah, sure, that's a possibility. So maybe knowledge is impossible.
Okay. Well, then there's just no more conversation left to be had.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, but listen, I don't pursue that, those types of questions. I don't find them particularly useful.
Well, so the only reason it's worth bringing up is because under your worldview, where essentially where kind of God is this foundation of reason and of justification and these sorts of things, that's an issue you have to contend with. Under my worldview, I think under Ian's and under Justin's as well, essentially we just assert, like a foundational to our belief is that there is an external world that is accessible.
Yeah.
And it doesn't depend on somebody potentially deceiving us, right?
Yes, but yeah, well, I believe that the world is inherently meaningful and that the world does not exist apart from meanings. I believe that it exists through meanings. So again, listen. What I'm proposing is just a completely different worldview, and I am not sure if it jives with the scientific understanding. I don't know if I can bridge that gap, and so that's not what I'm claiming.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we appreciate you coming up, but we'll probably move on to the next guest. I feel like this conversation has kind of hit a bit of like a dead end, but
Yeah, sure.
we do appreciate you coming on up here.
It was nice talking to you.
Yeah, it was
Absolutely.
nice talking to you. as well.
Likewise.
Thanks for coming.
It was an intentional wall, if you will.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Oh, sorry. I thought he was done talking. Thanks for coming up. We really appreciate it.
And I want to thank Rob again for $2 more, by the way.
Oh yeah, big W, Rob. Guys, thank you so much for being here. We announced earlier, but if you want to get into the discussion, you have to join at tinyurl.com/UA guest. You can also go to the description of the YouTube stream and just click on the link there. And the YouTube profile that we're streaming from is on the screen right here. Unapologetic Live is our YouTube handle. You can just throw that into YouTube and you'll get there quickly. We've got Tersa coming into the conversation. We'll get Tersa unmuted here. How you doing, Tersa?
Hi, I'm very fine. Thank you very much. Yeah, I just came up. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Also, how should we pronounce your name? Is it Tercia?
That's good. That's
Okay.
well done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
welcome in.
Does it help? Thank you so much. Yeah,
Are you
I
a-
saw that.
Are you a believer?
No, I'm not. I used to be though. So what I do find really interesting are conversations about the existence of God, and so I don't know whether you guys are believers or not. I just saw the topic and it interests me. So, are you a believer?
No,
No.
we're all atheists.
We're all
Okay,
atheists.
so
In which
I'm
case,
going to-
actually,
But
we actually do have to let you go. We are only taking opposition. That is the purpose of the live
Okay,
stream.
that's fine. That's fine. I didn't know that. I will keep
That's
on
okay.
listening. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
being
you for
here.
being here,
Yeah.
Tercia.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. We
I
did
believe we had
have
another guest ready to come up.
We
Oh,
did.
Angelo?
We did, but he dropped out.
I still see him.
Oh,
No,
you
this is
can
the
see him?
same.
I don't see him.
Ian, you see him? Oh, Tangelo, can you wait for
I
us?
certainly don't see him. Wait, what was this person's name?
Oh, Tangelo.
Yeah.
Can you wait for us,
Angelo.
Tangelo? I can still see you, I think.
Weird. Yeah, I don't see him in the room.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can't
I
hear
don't
him. Why don't try leaving and rejoining Otangelo?
Yeah.
Yeah, Otangelo, just drop out and come on back. I see some people on the TikTok comments saying, no, not Otangelo, which means he must have some people that already know who he is, so this should be interesting. Is it going to be another word salad, bro, or what's happening?
Is that what we're calling Phil Bros these days?
No, just the ones that want to spend an hour defining words. Also, Presup Mars, I see you crashing out in the comments. I don't know why you're afraid to come up. It's really weird.
No, he will never debate on like
Precept
a
Mars would
platform
never
where he doesn't
come
have the
up.
ability
Darth
to
Dawkins
mute.
would
He's
never
going
come up.
to.
Right.
Mm-mm.
There's a new character on the scene, Tan something, who would never come up. Anyway, Otangelo, I think we can you guys all see Otangelo?
Yeah, Otangelo should be here. I'm going to put him on the screen because he's actually got his video.
Beautiful.
His video going. So give me 1 second. We'll put him on the screen here. All right, Otangelo, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you guys.
Okay, your
microphone is very quiet.
really quiet though.
Let me check here.
No one can hear your microphone.
Well, we can hear it like just barely, but it's
Is it better
incomprehensible.
now?
It's better
It
now,
is,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's much
Oh
better now.
yeah.
Yeah. So, what's your belief system? I guess.
Yeah, I am a born again evangelical Christian already for 40 years. And
Wow.
yeah.
Awesome. So, what evidence do you have for the existence of God?
Well, I think that the impossibility of the contrary using eliminative induction is a
Yeah.
good approach
Yep.
to say that the God hypothesis is superior to the no God hypothesis.
Yeah. Let's hear the argument.
Just to be
Let's
clear,
premise one.
just a quick question before we start. Do you know who Darth Dawkins is, Otangelo?
Oh, yes, I know him very
Okay,
well.
just making sure. Just making sure. All right, continue.
Yeah. What's premise one of the argument?
Well, I am not a presup. I don't use the presup approach. I prefer the cumulative argument for God's existence, and
Well,
that starts basically with a basic question: is what is a more reasonable inference that an eternal, powerful, conscious, eternal creator created the physical universe or not? That
Well,
is the basic question.
I'm
And
so
if
sorry
I am-
to interrupt you and cut you off, but you said specifically that you believe this because of the impossibility of the contrary. Why is the contrary impossible?
Because nothing cannot create a universe. That would be the first thing. And the second, you have basically two alternatives. Either nothing created the universe or the universe has always existed. And I think that an eternal universe is also not plausible for basically three reasons: scientific reasons, the Big Bang, then philosophical reasons, time cannot extend eternally in the past, and we cannot come to the present by a sequence of time. And the third would be the second law of thermodynamics. Energy winds
should talk
down
about
in the
that.
sense that it cannot be used eternally to perform work.
Yeah. I think we'd like to talk about every one of those one at a time.
Great, yeah.
So which one do you want to start with?
What was the first one? Why don't we start with the first one?
Well, I think the easiest one would be that nothing, and with that I mean a philosophical nothing cannot create something because
So
it's
we
the
defend
evidence
the
of
eternal
anything.
universe. We don't defend that
Or
nothing
at least
created something.
at least a non-finite past universe.
Yeah. So let's go through your reasons. You want to take it away for the three reasons?
Yeah, go ahead. Which do you think is your best argument for why it's impossible to have, or why it's necessary that the universe must have a finite past?
I think the second law is pretty robust.
The second
Okay,
law of
wanna-
thermodynamics?
Yeah. Want to tell me what the second law is? Second law of thermodynamics?
It says that the universe starts with low entropy, and the direction is going towards high entropy, reaching a level where energy cannot perform any work anymore within a closed system. So yeah.
I mean, that's incorrect. On the face of it, that's incorrect. That would be a consequence of the second law of thermodynamics in a finite past universe with an infinite future universe. That would be a consequence of the second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics states that in a closed system, this means where energy, matter, all these lovely things are conserved, that the entropy is non-decreasing. But there's some presuppositions in that second law, namely that you have to assume that the universe is closed. You have to assume that the energy is constant. You have to assume things like time invariance. There's a lot of built-in assumptions that you have to assume in order for that to hold true. Namely, there are counterexamples to this idea that any system has an increasing entropy. For example, if you take any quantum system with a finite number of states, and you start it off in the lowest entropy state, and you just let it do its thing, after a fixed finite amount of time, you'll end up back in the lowest entropy state. After it passes through all the highest entropy states, it'll cycle around until you end up back in the lowest entropy state, even with no energy input at all. And so it's just not the case that necessarily, because you have a second law of thermodynamics, that the universe must have a finite beginning. It just doesn't follow. And I mean, cosmologists agree with me on this.
Well, I would say that upon our daily experience, we know that if you put a warm cup of water on the table, after a certain amount of time, it will become cold. So if we use just our daily experience, then I would say that it is the most reasonable position to hold, that energy, its possibility to perform work, that winds down, and the result will be a heat death where that energy cannot perform any work anymore, and then the universe would be basically dead. And that would mean that we cannot extend the existence of our universe into the past eternally.
So it is true that everyday experience, that's the kind of thing that can lead us to good physics, an everyday human-sized experience, like the second law of thermodynamics is a great law when you're trying to build engines, for example. But when you're asking about the fundamental nature of reality, you can't just say, it works on a human scale, so we don't have to worry about everything else, we can just assume it always holds. I mean, that's just, like, if you just even consider the most, the simplest example of quantum mechanics, where you have, an electron existing in some weird superposition, that under the worldview that you're promoting, where we just look at what's the simplest, what's the most everyday experience, that would be impossible, but it's clearly not.
Yeah. I mean, additionally, like if the standard is human experience, in my human experience, every mind I've ever encountered has been attached to a body. Therefore, we would conclude that a bodiless mind cannot exist. Therefore, we would conclude that God cannot exist.
Yeah, you are moving goalpost. I think that would be a different topic.
So maybe we can
talk about that. Yeah, the point is that everyday experience intuition is just not sufficient for explaining the absolute origins or foundations of reality. It's just arguing from intuition here is just not sufficient.
Well, first of all, I'm not making an absolute claim. Okay.
Okay. Well, I provided a counterexample to your intuition.
What I'm using is abductive reasoning to the best explanation.
And it's not the best explanation because there are counterexamples. So you have to provide a better explanation.
Well, the mere fact that there are counterexamples doesn't mean that it is not the best explanation. And I mentioned three reasons. One is the philosophy of time, the second law, and the third Big Bang theory, which states that the universe started in a hot, very dense and organized state, and then expanded very rapidly. And I think many cosmologists like Vilenkin and others, they say that you cannot expand back eternally. There has to be a starting point.
So we can appeal to. So for what it's worth, I'm published in Cosmological, or in one of the leading cosmological journals. So I do have some sense of authority here. There are some cosmologists who think that the universe actually had a finite beginning. Stephen Hawking would have been an example of them. These are causeless beginnings, though, which you probably don't like. But generally, it's not. There is no consensus as far as cosmologists go that the universe actually began at some moment in time 13.8 billion years ago. Rather, the consensus is that the universe was very small and very hot 13.8 billion years ago, and we can't really say much else about what existed prior to then. Does prior to then even make sense? There's just no consensus on that. That said, there are respected physicists who have proposed alternative models. These are things like cyclic models that are actually even consistent with your view of the second law of thermodynamics, where you can essentially just dump entropy into branching universes, and you can still have an infinite chain of universes that way, where they're forever expanding without having any required recollapse. There are other models that do have recollapse, resulting essentially in a reversal of entropy happening at the moment of maximal entropy, moment of maximal size. There's a lot of alternatives here, but there is no consensus that the universe actually began 13.8 billion years ago, or that space and time began 13.8 billion years ago.
Yeah, I agree with you. There is no consensus. There are many hypotheses, also eternal universe hypotheses, as you mentioned, cyclic universes. And I am just basically exposing here why I believe that the my hypothesis that a God, an eternal, powerful, eternal creator, is the best, is the most plausible explanation, putting all the hypotheses on the table and then comparing one to each other. Of course, this is just one argument, but as I am using the cumulative argument for God's existence, I put all of those to the table and then compare them to the no God hypothesis to come in the end to the result or the inference that it seems that the God that I believe in is the most reasonable or plausible explanation, which is the Christian God, which is Christ.
Right, but that rests on a finite past, and if you can't even provide a good explanation for why we should accept the finite past, there's no reason to accept the Christian God.
No, of course. I mean, the fact that eventually the beginning of the universe is a superior explanation to the contrary, that the universe is eternal, that would, of course, not lead to God. I agree with you.
Sorry. What I'm saying is, if you want to even get to any God, or any creator God anyway, you must first convince us, or at least provide a compelling argument that the universe had a finite past. Even then, it's insufficient because there are causeless beginnings. But if the universe did not have a beginning, if it does not have a finite past, then there's no chance for a creator God because the universe wasn't created.
Also, I would add, even if we agreed with you that the universe had a beginning point, you would have to somehow explain why a God hypothesis is more logical than a naturalistic explanation for the origin.
Yeah, first of all, I have never discussions with atheists trying to convince them or attempting to convince them. That's not my job. All I am doing is exposing the reasons why I believe that God is the superior explanation to the null God hypothesis. And then whatever an atheist or an opponent or whoever my interlocutor is does with that information, that's entirely up to that person or that group of persons. So I'm unconcerned in regards of attempting to convince others about my beliefs.
Yeah, wait, so how can God create the universe when time can't be created?
Well, who says that time cannot be created?
Yeah, I'll give you the argument for it. Do you agree that creation is a change of states?
Yes.
Do you agree that a change of states is a before and an after?
I believe that the moment of creation was the cause and effect was simultaneous.
Oh, but I'm sorry, was there a before state and an after state?
No, because the act of the transition from a timeless realm to a timely realm, that transition was simultaneous. There was no after and before.
Gotcha. So the universe was identical. So reality was identical before God created the universe as it was after. So the before and after are just the same state. So God's act of creation did nothing.
Let me explain like this. I believe that the potential of God actualizing energy to make it become physical in the sense that matter and atoms and so forth was created, that potential was already always there. So I don't agree with the ex nihilo supposition, which isn't even biblical.
Gotcha. So then the universe existed before God created.
No, what I believe that the power or God's capacity to instantiate or to transform a potential was always with him, within.
Did the universe exist before God created it?
No.
Okay. Did the universe exist after God created it?
Yes.
So then there's a before and an after, which are different.
Clearly.
Okay.
Yeah. So do you agree that this change of states requires a before and an after?
Okay, yes, I can go with that.
Yep. Do you agree that a before and an after has a past, present, and future?
No. I think that the act of creation the cause and the effect can occur simultaneously.
Yeah,
So-
but
Can you give
one
me an
still.
example? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think we all have the same point here.
Yeah.
He's saying
can you give
something
me an
existed
example of
and
a
not
cause and
existed at the same time. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask for an example of a cause and effect happening simultaneously.
Yeah, I can give you an example. Unfortunately, English isn't my native language, and
You're doing great.
yeah, let me see if I find the word in English, then I can give it to you.
Yeah, but what I'm hearing is a clear contradiction that simultaneously something existed and didn't exist.
Yeah.
No, I am
That at
not
the
saying
same
that.
time.
What-
Wait, so
What?
there was a time where the universe both did exist and also didn't exist because it was simultaneous.
No, I'm not saying that.
So at
What I am
T0,
saying
did the
is-
universe exist?
What I am saying is that at the act of creation, there was no time. The act, the cause and the effect was simultaneous. This removes the problem which you try to present.
Does a cause precede the effect typically?
Well, I mean, I think I don't know if
Can an
I
effect
can-
happen in relation to a cause unless the cause precedes the effect?
let me quote you here, Lane Craig, and he says following. Just a second.
Because my understanding is a
He
cause and
says,
effect is
God-
that they're divided by time.
Okay, let me quote you here. Craig says, God must be causally, but not temporally prior to the Big Bang. With the creation of the universe, time began, and God entered into time at the moment of creation in virtue of his real relations with the created order. It follows that God must therefore be timeless without the universe and temporal with the universe. And then he goes on and says, the cause of the Big Bang operated at 2, that is, simultaneously or coincidentally with the Big Bang. Philosophical discussions of causal directionality routinely treat simultaneous causation, the question being how to distinguish A as the cause and B as the effect when these occur together at the same time. Even on a mundane level, we regularly experience simultaneous causation.
So I'm just maybe there's something obvious I'm missing. Can you just give me an example of simultaneous causation?
Yes, just give me a minute. I'll try to find the word here.
Okay, I mean because apparently it's an everyday experience, and maybe I'll just be like, oh yeah, obviously simultaneous causation is totally normal, but I just
Yes.
can't think of one off the top of my head.
Yes. Just a minute. Google Translate didn't give me the word, but maybe ChatGPT gives it to me.
While we're waiting for this, make sure you're crucifying that subscribe button on YouTube. You know, absolutely slaughtering, putting to the sword that follow button, doing all that good stuff, getting out to the algorithm.
Ring the bell as the for whom the bell tolls, I guess, or something.
Yeah.
There's a metaphor in there somewhere. I'm just too lazy to come up with it.
And if you want to join the conversation, it's tinyurl.com/UA guest. You can also go to the YouTube channel, which is listed on the screen, and you can click the description and you'll see a link that'll let you into the discussion, and you can come on next.
To be clear,
Okay.
when Justin says tinyurl, he means tinyurl.com/UA guest.
Yes, I'm referring to it in the boomer language for those of us that are old. Mac, thank you
Anyway,
so much for all the
Otangelo.
hand hearts. Yeah.
You were
Yeah,
saying,
it is
Otangelo.
in English the seesaw.
A seesaw. It's not simultaneous. The cause is just not simultaneous with the effect. It's quite rapid, but it's not simultaneous.
Yeah, actually, I would say it is, because at the moment that on one side you go down, at the same time, the effect is that the other side goes up.
I mean, that's just mistaken. Like the what's it called? The signal is transmitted from a force being applied on one side to the other side going up slower than the speed of light. It's not. It's certainly not simultaneous.
Okay, the explanation here is this. A seesaw is a fascinating example of a system where cause and effect are tightly interlinked and instantaneous.
Well, that's wrong. It's incorrect.
Yeah, it's also not a closed system because the cause is clearly not the same on each end. Like the cause is external to the seesaw.
I mean, even if it were a closed system, the cause precedes the effect. You could measure this with a high-speed camera. You just get a high-speed camera, pointed at a seesaw, you will detect that one starts going down before the other one starts going up.
Yeah, here the explanation is this. The seesaw pivots around a fulcrum in the center. A child's action causes their side to go up, and
we know
this
seesaw works.
simultaneously
we do
makes
know how
the
seesaws
opposite
work.
side go down.
Yeah, we
Okay,
know how
it's just
simultaneous.
is that ChatGPT telling you that?
Yes.
Okay, ChatGPT is wrong. ChatGPT hallucinates on the regular. Please trust me when I assure you that no signal transmits faster than the speed of light. This includes a child's bottom touching one end of a seesaw. If it were the case that seesaws could transmit information faster than the speed of light somehow simultaneously, then we would just build a seesaw connecting Earth to the nearest star, and we'd be able to send messages back in time. It's just this is just not a correct understanding of the real world. If you had asked me 200 years ago, I might have been like, "Huh, that's weird and interesting." But we know better now, and we have Einstein to thank for that.
Yeah, but if we apply quantum physics, then you know that that effect exists, right?
No,
And
there's
it
no
is
information
instantaneous.
communicated faster than the speed of light. No, there's no communication happening faster than the speed of light.
Okay.
There's something called the no communication theorem, which is mathematically true. It's not just like some theory that physicists put forward. This is a mathematical truth that information cannot be transmitted from one point to another faster than the speed of light through quantum mechanical effects.
Okay. Well, so I am not convinced that this line of reasoning makes the creation of the world by a creator impossible.
Well, wait. So do you agree that it must have happened at different states of reality?
Well, of course, the supernatural realm is different than the natural realm, and of course there are also things which are beyond our mental understanding.
There we go.
Of course, you can now say that I am applying a god of the gaps here.
Okay, but
and in that case, I would actually even agree.
But Angelo, just what you literally just said that it must be true, even though you don't know how it's true. But what prevents us from saying the exact same thing from our side? It must be true, even if we don't know how it's true.
Yeah, in that case, I mean, you are justified to do that, and I am okay with it, and I am okay with myself to say that I really don't know.
Okay, and so I guess just as a follow-up, did the supernatural reality always exist?
Yes, something must have always existed because something cannot come from nothing.
Yeah, so why can't the thing that's always existed be the natural reality?
Well, let's suppose first that this would be the case, that the natural world would have always existed. First of all, that would not eliminate that God upholds the natural world, the God hypothesis, if that were the case.
It would, because if the universe has always existed, then it was never created. Because if something is created, then there's a precise moment where it comes into existence. So if it's always existed, there isn't a moment where it comes into existence, so it can't be created.
Okay, let's suppose that the universe always existed and wasn't created. That doesn't remove the God hypothesis because God can in parallel always have existed.
He just didn't create the universe.
This just seems like a superfluous hypothesis now. You have a universe, so you don't need a god to explain it.
Yeah, we're just adding Casper the Friendly Ghost to our metaphysics for no reason.
Right. So if the universe always existed and God always existed, what is it that God did? What did he do that we're aware of?
Well, maybe we can move on from the first cause argument, and the second would be the laws of physics and the fine-tuning of the universe.
Can't
Yep.
wait.
And
That's great.
And I mean, you can posit infinite multiverses, but I would just use Occam's razor and say, why use multiverses if we have just one God which fine-tuned the universe to make it life permitting?
Sorry,
Right.
which can you just clarify which things were fine-tuned and how you know?
Well, I actually wrote a book on it, on this topic. There are at least
Oh.
Whoa.
18.
Wait, do you have a degree in physics, by the way?
No, I am an
Why
autodidact.
why would you ever write a book on fine-tuning in physics if you don't have a degree in physics?
Well, why should I need to have one if I can inform myself having books and the internet and in special now artificial
That's a good point.
intelligence at hand?
That's a good point. You can be an autodidact, but if you were an autodidact, you would have known that the Seesaw example was not a good example.
Well, first of all, I don't need to know everything, okay? And I always learn by people which have a deeper or better understanding on certain subjects. That's the way I move forward and learn. And I have learned a lot in the past from atheists. So,
And that's fair. And this is just a warning to everybody. ChatGPT is not somebody you learn from, by the way. This is for everybody listening.
Right.
ChatGPT hallucinates. If you want to talk to somebody who's an expert, email them. Experts, especially at universities, they love, like, literally, I had a question about fine-tuning because I read a paper that had a claim. I just emailed the author, and he emailed me back like an hour later with explanations. You can just do that. That's allowed.
Yeah.
well, first of all, I agree with you that currently artificial intelligence hallucinates, but of course much broader and wider knowledge on in numerous topics than any one of us has. So it is, in my understanding, perfectly reasonable to use ChatGPT and other AI tools to inform ourselves. Now, we can check the information, and I do that all the time in order to check if what ChatGPT and other tools give me, if it's correct or wrong. I can Google it, and often it's false, and then I investigate further
Right.
until I
Fantastic.
come to the
Okay.
truth of the situation.
So the fine-tuning, there's a couple
discarding-
really easy
let me just
problems
quick
with the
finish. Let me just
fine-tuning.
quick-
We
I-
don't need a
I just wanna hear what-
meta-commentary.
I just want to hear what's actually fine-tuned. Like, what is the claim that which things are fine-tuned, do you think?
Well, if you start from the initial conditions of the universe to the Earth and the Moon, the stars, the star system, galaxies, the fundamental forces, the four fundamental forces.
Give me one.
The
Give me
masses.
one thing that's fine-tuned, and then we can talk about it.
Well, for example, the Earth, there are at least over 140 different parameters that must be just right.
Name one.
That was a bad choice for the Earth, by the way.
Yeah, that was the worst thing you could have said. This is going to be exciting.
Yeah. But name one. Name one of the 144.
Just the size of the Earth.
Okay, there are other Earth-sized planets that we've observed.
Do they have life?
We don't know. We've never really checked beyond like Venus and Mars and maybe the Moon if any other places had life.
But that brings up the fundamental flaw with the whole theory, which is you're assuming that the goal of these fine-tuning constants is life. You're saying like the goal is incredibly rare, therefore it must have been caused by a higher power. But
even more, I mean, let's say it's true that Earth-like planets that are suitable for life are quite rare. Let's say it's 1 in a trillion, 1 in a quadrillion. Whatever that number might be, we could do the math and figure it out. There are reasonable estimates put something like a trillion planets in the observable universe. And we have no reason to think that the observable universe is the entire universe. So even if it was 1 in a quadrillion, that's 1 with 15 zeros after it, would be a quadrillion. 14 zeros, I guess? 14 zeros after it. There would still be a million of those in the observable universe. So
Yeah, I have actually
that
done
makes the Earth quite
calculations,
reasonable.
and I have also considered the interdependencies, and I come up with an overall estimate odds number of 1 in 10 to 1,577.
Okay, can you walk us through part of the calculations of that? Step one, perhaps?
Well, maybe I can give you a link, and I mean, I don't think
So,
this is something that,
Just a question, did you do the calculations or did ChatGPT?
yeah, ChatGPT did the calculations.
Oh no.
Did ChatGPT write the book?
I use it for my investigation, and I use information from ChatGPT, certainly, yes.
Okay. So, do you have any response to the idea that we have no reason to think that the universe is finite in size? The universe, regardless of any non-zero probability?
Well, I think that the universe is finite, that it is not infinite. So it has a size which we don't know which one, how big it is, but there are science. I mean, the fact that the universe is fine-tuned, there is a scientific consensus. This is off the table that it's that it would not be fine-tuned, and I hope that you agree on that.
It's not off the table. No, absolutely not.
Okay, so I mean, I go just with the best physicists in regards
There is no
of
best physicist.
this issue.
And
I
for once, they're also atheists. So if you want to appeal to their reasoning, you have to understand their reasoning, what they mean when they say fine-tuning. Typically, when a physicist says fine-tuning, they don't mean fine-tuning in the sense that you do. They mean something called the naturalness problem, which is roughly, why is this number that we measured that's not 1, why is it not 1? 1 is the most natural number to a physicist for whatever reason. And so they'll say like, oh, the fine structure constant is, 0.07 or whatever, or 0.007. Why isn't that 1? And they'll say, oh, fine tuning. That's what they mean by fine tuning. Why is a number not 1 when it should be 1? But that doesn't lead them to the conclusion that therefore God. Rather, it leads them to the conclusion that there's an underlying mechanism. And there are underlying mechanisms for literally every single fine-tuning parameter that's ever been proposed. Or rather, there are proposed mechanisms for every single fine-tuned parameter.
Well, first of all, one thing is the scientific evidence and the physicists' evidence, and the other thing is what the physicist's personal inference and belief is. And, and the simple fact that the majority holds to the naturalistic view, that is an argument ad populum. That means nothing to me. I basically don't care about their philosophical beliefs. What I care about is the data, and then I will make up my mind by myself.
Okay, he's asking for the data.
What's the data?
The data is that there is a large number of parameters which must be just right. A few, I would say, there are even an infinite number of possible values, and the range, which is life permitting, is very narrow. And the fact is that the situation is that the numbers are in that fine explanation.
What's the data that the range is quite large? What's the data that the range that allows life is quite small? What's the data for that?
Well, for example, the cosmological constant, the expansion.
We can talk about that if you want. I've written a paper on that explains why the cosmological constant is quite small. We have mechanisms to explain these things that don't require God.
Okay, so...
That was the worst example prior to the 1990s.
Well, so would you agree that the expansion rate of the universe could be different than it actually is?
Could it in principle? Are we talking metaphysically possible? I don't know. I suspect not by much. I suspect it could not be different by much.
Okay, is there any physical necessity or constraint that says of the Big Bang or inflation must be precisely what it is?
Well, are we talking about the expansion rate currently or the expansion rate 13.8 billion years ago? Because the expansion rate 13.8 billion years ago is not well understood. We don't even have a consensus as to how fast it was expanding. So we don't know what the expansion rate was 13.8 billion years ago.
Okay, but what we do know is that the inflation epoch was extremely rapid. There was an extremely
We don't even know
fast...
if inflation happened.
Well, do you what is your hypothesis?
I'm agnostic.
It didn't happen?
I'm agnostic on inflation.
Okay, so what I do understand is, upon what physicists say, is that
Paul
there was
Steinhardt, one of the founders of inflation, says that he was one of the original authors of the inflationary papers. He has made the claim that inflation has been falsified. Now, I don't know if I believe him, because other authors who are also cosmologists who study inflation disagree, but it's at least contentious as to whether or not inflation is an actual thing in the real world.
I mean, there are many open questions in regards of the Big Bang Theory, which there is no consensus about. There are many open questions. But I think one isn't that indeed the expansion rate must be fine-tuned in order for not the
Where's the
universe to
consensus for
collapse.
that? Sorry, so which is currently under review in one of the better journals in the field, not the best journal, but one of the better journals, namely that we have good reason for thinking that the cosmological constant, the measured expansion rate of the universe, or that's related to the measured expansion rate of the universe now, must have been very, very small, and we measure it to be very, very small. So it could not have been large. It could have been smaller, but if it was smaller, then life would still be fine. So this is to say that it actually seems like there is a good mechanism to explain why the universe is expanding at the rate that it's currently expanding, which allows for life.
Which is?
Roughly, the fluctuate, and I'm basically just going to outline the details of the paper, but roughly the idea is that when you have fluctuating matter densities, which happens as a result of quantum mechanics essentially, that in the absence of gravity, that does cause an outward, people like to cite, oh, it would make the universe expand so much larger, so you have to fine-tune it down to be smaller. I wrote in the subject of a few earlier papers that it was inspired by, is that those fluctuating energy densities as a result of quantum mechanics, expansion, what you see is oscillation. So anybody who's taken differential equations classes would know that there are two different families of solutions in a second-order differential equation. There are exponential solutions, and there are oscillatory solutions. The gravitational force being stronger at these very submicroscopic levels than the expansive force from quantum fluctuations leads to oscillatory growth of spacetime, which averages out to be very, very slow expansion, or no expansion at all even is possible.
Okay, so what constrains the gravitational force?
You're talking about what constrains G? Like, why is G so small?
Yes.
So there are proposals for why G is so small. One of those proposals is renormalization that you get from string theory. String theory is speculative, but at least there are proposed explanations. I believe loop quantum gravity has a proposed renormalization reason as well, but I'm not as familiar with loop quantum gravity.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why G couldn't be different, smaller or greater.
I mean, there are proposed explanations. You'd have to look into the string theory literature if you want to see some of those explanations. Suffice it to say, like, there are proposed explanations for why the strong force is strong, for why the electromagnetic force is slightly weaker, for why gravity is quite a bit weaker. These generally follow from quantum field theory and renormalization.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there is a lot of speculation and uncertainty here. We also know
so we
that
don't need a god to explain it. We can explain it through purely physical mechanisms. So why add Casper the Friendly Ghost to your metaphysics when we can do just fine with naturalism?
Okay, so could the quark composition be different than it is?
I don't know what you mean by that. Quarks aren't composed of anything.
Well, a proton is made by 2 ups and 1 down, correct?
Sure.
Okay, could it be different? And could
it would just be a different thing.
Yes, and
like
could it have different masses?
So the quark mass hierarchy problem is a problem that's also, like, it's a naturalness problem, but apparently, again, you can unify these with supersymmetry, for example. Supersymmetry explains the quark hierarchy, which would explain why the up quark to down quark ratio is what it is, why the strange quark to up quark ratio, mass ratio is what it is, these kinds of things.
Yeah, we could have completely different universes, and we could have different
Not if
quark
supersymmetry is real.
compositions.
I mean, look, like we have physical explanations for these phenomena.
What I am saying is that there is no physical constraint or necessity that the quark compositions are the way they are.
I mean, that's a claim, and it seems like every single time people make that claim, like about the cosmological constant, it takes 20 years until somebody figures out a possible mechanism. In particular, the quark masses are explained by something called a seesaw mechanism in supersymmetry.
Oh, wait, what mechanism?
Seesaw, at least that explains the mass hierarchy.
Well, then I would ask, what is the explanation of that explanation? And is there physical necessity that it has to be the way it is? And I would say that it is an extreme position to take to say the universe couldn't be different and couldn't have the parameters that it has.
It seems like, so could pi, 3.14, could that have been a different number? Is there an alternative universe where that's a different number?
Well,
is that a possible world?
Well, I don't think that is a fair or reasonable comparison. As I said, the fact that the quarks are with that composition to making up protons and neutrons, that is a state of affairs that is perfectly possible that it could be different. And the question is, why is it precisely the way it is, which permits to have stable atoms?
If I had asked the Greeks 3,000 years ago, is the ratio of a circumference to a circle, the circumference of a circle to its diameter constant, they would be like, yeah, it could be different. But then we figured out, Euclidean geometry, and now we know, actually, no, it couldn't be. It's a geometric fact of nature. The ratio of the circumference of a circle to its diameter is 3.14-ish. I mean, like, just because we don't understand now why it must be the case as a fact of reality that, supersymmetry, that's an appeal to, well, it's not an appeal, that's an essence with sufficient experimental data and theoretical undergirding, we end up finding explanations for these things. Like, if we're going to use induction here, the inductive argument is that, hey, every time we have a question about the physical nature of reality, we end up finding an answer.
Okay, so when the answer in almost all cases goes the naturalistic hypothesis, what do you do about it? Do you just insert the naturalism of the gaps and say, well, tomorrow science will have an answer and it will be a naturalistic explanation?
Is say, well, we don't know. I guess that means God exists. Being certain of something when you have no reason to be doesn't make you more correct. It actually makes you twice as wrong. You're now behind 2 layers of ignorance. You don't have any evidence, so you don't have any justification, so you don't actually know why this is the way it is. And because you have certainty in a false explanation, you don't even know that you don't know. If you don't know, the most responsible thing that you can do is to just say that you don't know.
And for what it's worth, this point of naturalism of the gaps actually gets brought up quite a lot. And while it is a good point that there is an assumption made that, generally the scientific process is fairly good at coming to conclusions about the natural world, so we have good reason to think that it works. Naturalism of the gaps is at least a more well-founded proposition than a God of the gaps, because God of the gaps has never been right. Naturalism of the gaps has literally always been right. We've always found naturalistic explanations over the course of history. We've never found supernatural explanations throughout the course of history.
I would actually completely disagree with that, because science has moved forward, and a classical example is like, for example, in 1860, 1870, Haeckel and those guys, they thought that cells were just protoplasm, something very, very simple and easy to explain, and that therefore it would have a naturalistic cause. As far as science moved forward, instead of corroborating and confirming that cells are simple, it has unexpectedly and against scientific thought, it has shown that it is contrarily the case in actually that cells are extremely complex, and nobody expected that life works based on
Yeah,
complex
but did we find God in the
structural
cell, or did we find
information.
more naturalistic
So,
things in
so
the
the
cell?
so the question is, if science is moving forward and brings up to light evidence which cannot be plausibly explained by unguided natural mechanisms, what do you do out of it? That's precisely in the beginning when I said I can infer
Angelo,
God as
listen,
best explanation based on eliminative
listen, we'd
induction.
like to adjust your point. Would you like us to adjust your point? Because you're suggesting that because science learned more things about the cell that we didn't know in the original assumption, that somehow science is bad. But when we learned more about the cell, the explanation was still naturalistic. As we learn more about the natural world, our base assumptions about the naturalistic world are going to change. But at no point in time, as we learn more, do we insert God. But all of the fine-tuning discussion is nonsensical, because fine-tuning only matters if you think the universe has intention. It doesn't matter. Like, if I had a ball pit full of 1 trillion balls, and I said I'm ball number 5, that would be a miraculous feat. Yes, the odds of me doing that is incredibly high. It would have to be supernatural somehow. But if I just reach my hand in there with no intent, so just because the constants of the universe are a particular way doesn't mean that they were intended to be that way, and therefore it's meaningful. The fact that life exists is meaningless. It could just as be that for 1 trillion years in the past, life didn't exist. It's just a fact of the universe.
Yeah, I also want
Yeah,
to add on
I
to
mean,
this that cells aren't just complex, they're unnecessarily complex. Large portions of your DNA are completely useless. Large portions of your DNA are worse than useless, they're actively harmful to you. And this is indicative of the fact that your cells literally have a repair mechanism. It would be much more it would be simpler if there was no repair mechanism, if all the DNA was useful, but because there is unnecessary complexity, that actually points to the fact that a perfect God didn't design it. Otherwise, we wouldn't expect all these superfluous elements.
well, you need actually repair mechanisms of DNA and also during translation in the ribosome
Why do
right
mutations
from
happen? Why wouldn't God make it such that these
the
don't
beginning,
happen?
because mutations indeed happen. And if there were not repair mechanisms right from the get-go, then you would have a too high mutation rate and then extinction. So there is no life known or cells known that do not have repair mechanisms on several different levels, starting with DNA and then also during transcription and translation and replication. So that, of course, then comes the question up: what came first, the repair mechanisms in the cell or the cell itself? If
That's
both
not
are
the follow-up
essential in order
question.
for having cells that can replicate and then continue to be alive.
Why would God make mutations possible in the first place?
Well, instead of jumping to a different question, it would
No,
be
that's directly
important that you
connected.
actually address what I
That's
just
directly
said.
connected to that. This is a defeater to your worldview, specifically saying, well, we need the repair mechanisms to stave off the mutations, leads immediately to the question of why would God allow mutations at all in the first place?
I would actually answer, if I'd be you, how it is possible that natural mechanisms can instantiate at the same time living cells
Are you gonna
which operate
dodge?
based on information, and
Yeah,
at the
we've got a
same
dodging
time.
Daryl.
You're just gonna dodge the question? Why would God allow mutations in the first
No.
place?
You are actually not addressing
I
the
asked you
point
Tangelo,
my
which I am
question
actually
first.
it's
making.
an
I
internal
asked you my
critique.
question first.
He's asking
Well,
you a
I
question
believe.
about your worldview, Tangelo.
Well, I don't know.
Oh,
That
cool.
isn't
Wait.
a God defeater,
Why does it seem to be necessary?
because we have mutations which require to be corrected.
But why
So
are
to be
mutations
clear,
necessary?
hold on. So
I
just to
don't
be
know.
clear, so just see, it's not obvious at all that the constants of the universe are necessary to be the way they are. And then I say, well, maybe they are. We just don't know why. And now when pressed, why are mutations necessary? You just say, I don't know why they are. They just are. So it seems like Like you're trying to have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah. So I
If
just want to be
something
clear.
necessary without knowing
Okay,
why.
let me address that. First of all, there is no necessity for the Earth to having the size it has, the Moon to have the size it has, the
This is
distance
a
between the Moon
kindergarten,
and
man.
the Earth to be the distance it
This is a
is,
kindergarten
the
fine-tuning argument.
distance
You just
between the
use
Sun
anthropic
and the
reasoning.
Earth to be the distance it is. These are just a few of the parameters which must be just right. We can perfectly
Just right for what?
imagine, and indeed there are other planetary systems where
Just-
these
just right for
parameters
what?
are completely different and they are not
Anthropic
life
reason.
permitting.
Do you know what the Angelo, do you know what the anthropic principle is?
Excuse me?
Do you know what the anthropic principle is?
The anthropic principle. Well, this is a circular argument because it doesn't explain why the universe is the way it is, why it is life permitting rather than non-life permitting.
Angelo, the anthropic principle as it applies to like the solar system essentially says that in a universe that is sufficiently large where life is possible, it is expected that you would find yourself, it is expected with 100% certainty that an observer would find themselves in a place where life specifically is possible. So if life is possible at all in our universe, it is 100% expected that we would find ourselves in a place where life happened, because of course it is. And because our universe is it's not circular. It's just a tautology. It's not a circle. The point is like the most sophisticated fine-tuning arguments. And this is just advice, by the way, for anybody watching. If you're going to make the fine-tuning argument, you don't make the argument about the Earth being such and such distance from the sun or the Earth having a moon, because that's handled by anthropic reasoning very easily. Instead, you make the argument that the cosmological constant is too small, or that the ratio of the up quark to down quark mass is too small. So that's the argument that you make regarding the Earth. That's like no serious philosopher makes that argument at all. William Lane Craig doesn't even make that argument. Serious philosopher. So, but this is to say, the point I was making earlier is that if I say, oh, the fundamental constants of the universe are just necessary and we don't know why, you say that's ad hoc. But then when Ian says, the existence of mutations is so surprising, you say, well, that's necessary. I just don't know why. So why can't we now say that's ad hoc reasoning as well?
No, I didn't say it is necessary. I said there are mutations.
You absolutely did.
Okay, then maybe, or you misunderstood me, or I said what I actually wanted to say. What I'm saying is that we know that mutations happen, and if they are not corrected, then cells cannot perpetuate, they would go extinct. So from the get-go. Now, the question was, could God have created a life that doesn't have mutations, and then repair mechanisms would be required? So to that question, I said, I don't know. Maybe yes, because I believe actually that there will be eternal life. So that presupposes that there will be no mutations. Of course, I could also mention the fall, which is mentioned in Genesis, but then, of course, the question would be, well, did God instantiate these repair mechanisms after the fall or before? So these are hypotheses and speculations.
I don't think that would be our question.
Yeah, that's not the question at all. My question about the fall is, how do you explain dinosaurs with cancer that existed millions of years before the fall? That's my question.
Well, I don't believe they existed before the fall. I believe that God created them. I am a young Earth creationist, so I don't believe that.
William Lane Craig isn't even a young Earth creationist, by the way.
Well, I don't care if he is or he
isn't. Okay, I'm just saying. You were appealing to his reasoning.
I just put the Bible as my foremost and first authority in regards of origins questions. And I mean, you can criticize me on that. I am fine with it. Okay. No problem.
How do you explain uranium-lead dating?
Yeah.
Well, I've not studied that.
Were there natural disasters before the fall?
Well, I really don't have questions to all these answers to all these questions, and I cannot answer it.
So I just want to point something out to the audience. You seem to know an awful lot about like the cosmological constant, which is like the cosmological constant problem posited by particle physicists in the 1990s when it was first measured. This is like just out of scholarly work, like 20 years old. But for some reason, you don't know about uranium lead dating, which is a central contradiction to your worldview, which, was first discovered in the 1940s and was used to date the age of the Earth in the 1950s. Like, it just seems like you are intentionally ignorant of things that dismantle your worldview.
Well, the thing is that I believe that a lot of these data of billions of years, they depend on presuppositions which are made in order to make then the experiments and coming up with the data. Now, I cannot give you the details in regards of how these experiments are made and so forth.
You can.
I mean, okay, cool. I mean, and if you believe in billions of years, I am fine. There are Christians which are like Craig. He is an old Earth creationist. I perfectly respect it. I have no problem with it. Now, I mean, as I said, I am a young Earth creationist because I think there are good reasons to be as well. There are problems in both views, also in the old Earth, like the young song paradox, and other problems like the soft tissue in dinosaur problems. And I perfectly respect if others have a different view on that. I have no problem with it. I was also an old Earth creationist before I moved to agnostic, and then I became a young Earth creationist.
Sure. So do you believe in the all goodness? Do you think that an all good God causes unnecessary suffering?
I believe that God, he knows everything, all the possible worlds.
That was just a yes or no. Does an all good God cause unnecessary suffering?
Unnecessary suffering. That's a difficult question. I've not thought about it, so I prefer not to answer.
Is it possible for something to be all good if they cause unnecessary suffering?
Intuitively saying, I would say no. Now, I don't know if our world causes unnecessary suffering.
Sure. Well, I think Ian brought up a current example with the DNA, and I would also posit natural disasters as part of that. Before the fall, there weren't genetic disorders and natural disasters.
Yeah, but my first discussion with atheists isn't about if God is all good or not.
It was just a yes or no, though.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so after the fall, there certainly were, even in your world, do they need to exist?
I think they are the consequence of the fall.
Right, but do they need to exist?
I don't know.
Okay,
Does
so
God have the power to say abracadabra and take them all away?
Yeah, maybe God could say.
So they certainly wouldn't be consistent with the God of the Bible if the God of the Bible is all good, but I don't think the God of the Bible is consistent with himself, because you probably believe in a God that's perfectly just as well, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, you get into philosophical questions, which I certainly don't know the mind of God. I don't know why he fashioned our world the way it is with suffering. So I leave that really open.
So are you saying that God has like higher order reasons?
Oh, you're doing it again.
That is a possibility, sure. I don't think that I have the mind of God or the knowledge of God or the intelligence of God in order to evaluate his motivations to create this world the way it is.
Yeah, I just can't. I can't help but put the guest in the vat. How do you know that God is
vatted?
You're about to be vatted. How do you know that God isn't deceiving you about the existence of the world for reasons that are higher than your understanding?
Yeah, I trust the God of the Bible. For 40 years that I follow Christ, I believe that he's truthful. He said, I am the truth, the way, and life. Nobody comes to the Father than through me. And
So just faith?
And I trust.
So just faith?
Yes.
Oh, God. And do you think that faith gives you justification?
Well, the faith is the result of my experience with the God of the Bible.
Does faith yield an epistemic justification?
I think that reasonable faith is the result.
Does faith...
You can answer yes or no, and then give an explanation. That's
yeah.
okay.
Does faith give you an epistemic justification? That is, like, faith in it.
I would say, okay, no. I think that faith is the result, or reasonable faith is the result of a sound epistemological framework, and then based on that you do your investigation in regards of worldviews and origins. And once you have done that, then eventually you come to a conclusion, either into one or the other direction. But since we are talking about metaphysics, to which we have no access by empirical science, so it is a matter that we can only embrace by faith. But it would be reasonable faith because it is a result of a sound investigation.
So it seems like we've hit a contradiction, because I take knowledge, let's keep it simple. Let's say knowledge is just justified true belief. If faith doesn't give you justification, then you can't say that you have a justified true belief that you aren't like a brain in a vat and God isn't like keeping you this way for reasons that are higher than your understanding. So you actually don't know that reality exists.
I have no absolute knowledge in regards of metaphysics and ultimate reality.
I'm not saying absolute knowledge or like 100% certainty. I'm just saying knowledge that is a true thing that you believe with the justification to believe it.
I think that the methodology that I am applying, which is a sound epistemological framework, permits me to come to rational and reasonable belief.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, what's your epistemology?
I use science, philosophy, and theology.
Yeah, but how do you know that God isn't deceiving you about all of these things for reasons that are higher than your understanding?
Yeah, again, I don't know that in an absolute sense. I'm using my intuition, my experience, and reasons that come from my investigation.
And how do you know that God isn't deceiving you about all of these things for reasons that are higher than your understanding?
Well, ultimately, it could be.
But do you have any justification that would lead...
The crucifixion of Jesus tells me that he loves me and that he doesn't lie to me.
And how do you know that God didn't deceive you about...
Well, again, I don't know it.
So you have no justification?
So absolute knowledge doesn't mean that I have no
I
justification.
didn't say anything about absolutes. We're not talking absolutes. We're just talking knowledge. It's not that you don't have absolute knowledge. You don't have any knowledge.
Okay, I'm a little bit confused now.
Yeah, because you can't have any justification for anything, because it's always possible that God is deceiving you about all of this stuff for reasons that are higher than your understanding. And in fact, you must remain agnostic about this, insofar as you're agnostic to what God's higher reasons are, which means you're agnostic to any knowledge claim.
Yeah.
So you can't have any knowledge claim.
Yeah, of course, you can adopt the nihilist view.
It's an internal critique.
Well, of course, you can take the stance that you want to remain...
This isn't my stance. This is yours.
I think that I made clear how I came to a justified belief in the Christian God.
Yeah, what grants your justification?
Philosophy, science, and theology.
Yeah, and how do you know that God isn't deceiving you about all of these things for reasons that are higher than your understanding?
Again, I don't know it, and I don't think that I need to know it in an absolute sense.
So then you don't have any justification for any of your beliefs, which means none of your beliefs are justified true beliefs, which means that none of your beliefs are knowledge.
I think we are running in circles here, Jan, because I don't I don't think that I need absolute proof.
Nobody said anything about...
So if reasoning to the best explanation, the best explanation for me is sufficient. My experience is enough for me. Biblical revelation is enough for me, and that gives, in my understanding, me just a justified, reasonable belief.
How do you know the Bible is revealed from God?
Now, let me quick finish. If your criticism is that this basis isn't enough to have a justified, reasonable belief, that's your opinion. I disagree.
Yeah, but your disagreement doesn't answer the question, which is how do you know that God isn't deceiving you about all of these things?
Answered it already. I don't know.
I think you haven't.
It is possible.
So we have this idea, if you're a naturalist, you essentially take for granted this idea called, that I learned from you, phenomenal. You basically take for granted this idea called phenomenal conservatism, which is roughly that seemings, the way things seem to be, provide at least some justification for beliefs. So for a naturalist or a materialist or a physicalist, whatever, we can use the scientific process to investigate it and so on and so forth. So we can come to knowledge because we have some degree of justification, we can form beliefs, and then we can, prove that those things are true or false. The trouble is that on your worldview, you have this metaphysical entity, call it God, that is capable of deceiving you, and you've even admitted is something that it might do. In which case, this possibility overrides the seemings, because the seemings themselves could be deceptions. And once you no longer have access to this phenomenological conservatism, well, now you're kind of screwed, because you can't actually build a justified belief for any position. All of the things that you'd like to appeal to, science, philosophy, on this belief that the external world is real and you can interact with it, you can read the Bible, you can run experiments, etc. But if the undergirding for all of those are broken by this possibility that God might just be deceiving you about everything, then all of your justifications fall away. And that's the issue.
Now the question is it reasonable to believe that we are dealing with a God which intention was to create a world and humans to intentionally deceive them? And as I brought up the crucifixion, I think that this is empirical evidence that
That's
God...
the mistake. The mistake is that you know anything about God at all. The crucifixion could have been a deception. All of the entirety of the Bible that informs you on the character of God could have been a deception. The moment God is able to deceive you for some higher order reasoning, everything you think you know about God, which was informed by your senses, by historical evidence, by scientific evidence, whatever, all of that could be completely false and you have no justification for believing that it's true.
Okay, the question now is it reasonable to believe that this is the case?
No. Your worldview, no.
Exactly.
Yeah. So but from your perspective, it's inevitable. From your worldview, it's going to be inevitable.
You have no way of evaluating whether it's reasonable because you don't know any qualities of God.
Through the Bible.
But those could have been deceptions. That's the point.
The question is it reasonable to believe that these are all deceptions?
It very well could be, depending on the qualities of God. If God, for example, if Loki is the true God, right? Loki, the trickster God. If Loki is the true God, it would be entirely reasonable because his whole thing is deception. And because because the nature of God itself is the thing in question, you have no idea. You're not able to build any sort of state of mind or behavioral principles for how this God might act, because that's the thing in question. And so it's completely unfounded.
If you think it is reasonable and a justified belief that this is the case, then go for it. I think it's not.
It's an internal critique, meaning that under your worldview, you are forced.
Well, no, I'm not forced to accept this. I can concede that this is a hypothesis which would be possible because there is no logical inconsistency in this scenario. Now, I don't buy it.
Okay, yeah, wait, so I just have some questions. Does God have higher reasons?
Excuse me?
Does God have higher order reasons?
Well, I think that God has knowledge which is beyond our access, of course.
Does God do things for reasons that are higher than our understanding? Do we know what these reasons are?
No, otherwise there would be no higher reasons that we don't understand.
Yeah. So, in the same vein, do we know whether or not one of God's higher reasons would lead him to deceive us about everything?
Again, no, we don't know that.
Gotcha. So then we're agnostic to whether or not God is deceiving us about everything in your worldview, which means we are agnostic to whether or not we're being deceived in your worldview, which means that we are agnostic to whether or not reality exists at all in your worldview.
Okay. Now, as I said previously, of course you can take that stance and based on that become an agnostic.
It necessarily follows.
And then basically saying, I have no position or confession whatsoever in regards of reality, in regards of God's nature, in regards of what God thinks or what his intentions are. And therefore, I don't even seek him. I don't want to live following Christ. I don't want just to live my life the best I can. I will just admit that my life has absolutely no
So
meaning, and that's it. Of course, I could
there are two
take that
outs.
stance. The question is it reasonable to take that stance?
There are two outs, by the way. There are only two outs as far as I'm aware. Maybe there's more. Somebody in the comments will mention it. First out, you just say, no, God doesn't have, and then you have to tackle with problems of evil, but that might be easier than tackling with ultimate skepticism. The second out is believe phenomenological conservatism, which gets you to naturalism. Those are your two outs here. Otherwise, you fall into the vat.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be vatted.
Yeah, no, my stance is that I don't know why there are certain kinds of suffering which appear to be not necessary. I leave it to God.
Yeah, so that's the exact predicament, that you're in between a rock and a hard place of either having to take an affirmative stance as to why specific evils exist, or you say, I don't know, and you get vatted.
And nobody wants to be vatted.
Well, I am honest to say that I don't have all the knowledge and understanding for why God chose to bring up Noah's flood, or why he ordered the genocide, why he didn't make it more clear that slavery is wrong. I mean,
He said
We don't have to deal with these questions at all. We don't have to deal with the flood because we don't think a flood happened, right? Like, that's not something that we have to deal with. That's something you have to deal with.
Okay, yeah, of course, but I am fine with not having answers to all questions. That doesn't mean that I don't have a satisfying worldview which gives me peace and hope and meaning.
Well, what it does mean is that you're a brain in a vat, or at least you can't escape the brain in a vat.
I cannot escape the fact that I am not all-knowing.
It's not what I said.
And I have no problem with that.
That's not what I said. That's not the critique. The critique is that you must be agnostic to whether or not God would be deceiving you about everything.
Yeah, I am agnostic in regards of that. I agree with you.
Okay.
It is a logical possibility. I just don't buy it.
So if you're agnostic about God deceiving you, then do you agree that you're also agnostic about whether or not you're deceived?
Yes, I'm agnostic
Gotcha.
about
So
that.
you're agnostic to whether or not you're deceived about, say, reality existing at all. You take the agnostic position as to whether or not reality is all a deception by God. You're agnostic to this.
Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. So...
Yeah, you might exist in a vat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can take an agnostic stance far wider and far further than that. The question is if it is warranted. And I think it's not, based on my personal experience.
But this is prior to your personal experience. Questions of whether or not skepticism is true are prior to questions about your personal experience. And if you agree that you're agnostic to whether the skeptical hypothesis is true, i.e., you're agnostic to whether or not you're a brain in a vat, that means that you're be agnostic to all of your experiences, whether any of them are true. So you just don't have any knowledge claims at that point.
The question here is this. Is it warranted, based on the fact that I don't have knowledge about God's ultimate goals and proceedings, that I take an agnostic stance? And I say no. I am not. I don't think
You
I'm
literally agreed to
justified
this
because
like
of
3 minutes
that.
ago. So we can just go through the questions again. I mean, so you agree that you are agnostic to God's higher reasons, which means that you're agnostic to whether or not one of God's higher reasons would entail him deceiving you about everything. You agree that you're agnostic to that, about whether or not God would deceive you about everything. You make no claims, affirmative or negative, about whether God would deceive you about everything.
I have no absolute knowledge about this.
That's not what I asked.
Yeah, but based on my experience, I don't think this is a reasonable stance to take, that this is
wait. I just asked you a question.
Hypothesis.
Well, hold on, because I didn't put forward a proposition. I asked you a question. Do you make any affirmative claims or negative claims as to whether or not God would, one of God's higher reasons would lead him to deceiving you about everything? Do you make any claims related to that?
Okay, this is a possibility which I cannot exclude. I give you that. But
So do
I don't,
you make no affirmative or negative claims about whether or not God is deceiving you about everything?
right.
So you make no affirmative or negative claims as to whether or not you're being deceived about everything?
Yes, right.
So then you're agnostic to whether or not reality exists. You've been vatted.
I think questioning if reality exists or not, I would have to be agnostic and not believing in my senses. I don't know why this should be a reasonable position to take.
Because you have no way of garnering justification.
Well, I think I do, because I think that my senses, they give me a real access to reality.
So if your senses give you a real access to reality, is it possible that God is deceiving you about your senses giving you real access to reality?
Yes, it is possible. The question is if it is reasonable to believe that this is true.
So you think it's possible that both A and also not A?
Well, this is a logical contradiction, so no, that's
Yes,
not
exactly.
possible.
Yeah, precisely. Yes.
That's
So
a different issue, though.
it is the exact same issue. If you believe that your senses give you access to reality, then you must necessarily believe that the opposite cannot be the case. So it's not possible that God could be deceiving you about your senses if you take the affirmative stance that your senses are reliable. Which means that you actually would be making a hardline claim that God's higher reasons would not lead him to deceive you.
I'm sorry.
And by the way, if you take the phenomenological conservatism point, namely that your senses are reliable, you very quickly get to naturalism.
Yeah, I think the whole discussion boils down to the question, is it reasonable to believe that God is deceiving us? And I don't simply think that this is the case.
How
why
can you
not?
know that?
Yeah.
Because of the crucifixion.
Okay, because of the Bible.
Right.
How
Okay.
do you know that
Which
God
you
is
read with your
deceiving
eyes.
you? Yeah.
I mean, you come to a point where there are some axioms which you simply have to take as true. And it makes no sense to try to go further than that. And that seems what you are implying or trying to do. And I don't think it is reasonable.
This is a problem for your worldview, not a problem for my worldview.
Okay, what is the problem for your worldview?
That's your job.
Okay. One we tackled already, which is the fine tuning, and I can give you an example
We did
here.
tackle that, you're right.
Yes. So if you have someone which wins 200 times in a row the Powerball lottery, and you have two possible explanations: one that someone cheated, and the other that someone cheated rather than not. Now, if you have 469
I mean, those aren't the only
fine-tuned
possibilities.
parameters,
That's
and they
kind of a
give you
strong
an
man.
overall
But
fine-tuned
again, what you're laying out
odds.
assumes that there's a primary task at hand. The primary task is winning the Powerball. The universe doesn't have a primary task. The universe has no goal in mind.
Right. So that if that is the case, that the fine-tuned parameters could indeed be different than what they are, then we should expect to find no universe whatsoever, or one that is non-life permitting. The
No, there
fact
would
that
still
it
be
is
a
life
universe.
permitting questions
You're
the
presupposing that the
naturalism
goal of the
paradigm.
universe is life. You're presupposing that the universe has a goal and that goal is life.
And he's
No, I don't
presupposing that
presuppose it.
he's presupposing that the universe could have been different, and he's presupposing that if the universe could have been different, it wouldn't have been life persons built in here, that none of which have been justified.
Well, no, I do not presuppose that the universe could be non-life permitting by the observable fact that there are many planets in the universe which are not life permitting.
And there is one planet that
planet is life permitting, and it depends on several parameters which must be fine-tuned, and that demands an explanation.
It doesn't demand
no,
an
I mean,
explanation. You're assuming that the goal is life. How do you know that life is the goal of the universe?
I don't assume that.
Okay,
What
so
I
it's
am
just exists is meaningless unless you think that life was the goal.
I don't start with the presumption
Tangelo,
that life was the goal.
can I ask a
start
question?
with the evidence. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I? Yeah. So like, and Justin kind of alluded to this earlier, but I think we can lay it out this way. So, actually, I have two questions. The first one, 100 numbered balls in it, it's like a lottery bag, right? You reach into the bag and you pull out a number. What's the odds that you get a number?
Well, the odd is 1. But
Yeah,
here,
okay.
here okay,
So,
but here is the thing.
We have
Here is the
a
thing.
configuration. Now, is there a reason why you think that the odds that I pulled this out, this is so special and surprising? Well, no.
Well,
You were going to pull something out, right?
Yeah, the issue here is when the goal is you to have a meaningful or a specified outcome, and then you calculate the odds. Like for
How
example,
do we know that how do we know that there's that goal?
I would say that life is very special, very, very special.
It's rare. We can say that it's rare. I'll agree with you on that. Well, actually, it might be rare. We don't even know. Life actually might be remarkably common. There might be life in our solar system, for all we know, like more life.
Well, I've written also a book on the origin of life.
Did you write it or did ChatGPT write it?
Yeah, ChatGPT wrote it.
Oh, okay, fine. ChatGPT wrote it. But independently of this, what we do know, independently of ChatGPT, is that life is composed basically on 2 basic components, which is chemistry and information. Would you agree on that?
Information is subjective. I would say it's built on chemistry.
I disagree with that definition of information, most likely.
Yeah, there is no that's not subjective. That is a fact. That is
no,
a
I mean it is
fact.
like the way that you measure information. In order to like, are you using like Shannon entropy to measure information? Or are you using Kolmogorov complexity? Like, what are you doing to measure information here?
Well, we can measure information by bits, like codons.
Okay, so like Shannon entropy.
I think that the genetic code isn't based just on Shannon information, but it is actually like a language.
How are you measuring the amount of information present?
Well,
how are you quantifying
the more restrained or rare that a sequence of information is, the more information is stored in it. Like for example.
Okay, so you're measuring it with Shannon entropy then.
Okay, so for example, you have certain amino acids which, for example, you have certain amino acids which are just encoded by one codon. Then you have some amino acids that are encoded by up to 4 codons. So the one that uses only one, then the one where you have 4 different possible codons that are assigned to an amino acid.
Sure. Okay. So you're measuring entropy in you're measuring information using Shannon entropy. That's a choice that you can make. It's a fine choice for a lot of applications where you have random variables, but you don't think that there's a random variable here. So perhaps a better, like if you wanted to measure information from your worldview, you might want to use Kolmogorov complexity, which is a measure of how much, essentially a measure of how many lines of code is it necessary to reproduce that data. Now, as far as I'm aware, I don't know if the Kolmogorov complexity of the human genome has been estimated. So I don't even know how you would begin to quantify that.
So the problem is,
by the way, I have to go in 1 minute.
The human genome, if you were to represent it in code, it would have a bunch of fucking gibberish in between, like unorganized parts that actually do something. So
that would be a different conversation. I don't think what you are saying is sound. We know that junk DNA, a lot of it has
I didn't
function.
say junk DNA.
Yeah, but that's usually
there is
the
DNA
argument.
that doesn't have function. Do you agree?
Okay. I think that maybe that is due to entropy, the genetic entropy. But the thing that has to be explained is the portion which is actually coding. And the question is, what is the cause of this state of affairs where you have a string of specified complex nucleotides stored,
Yeah, the cause is going to be evolution.
which convey, well, in order to start life, you need a minimal genome of about 1 million nucleotides. And you cannot invoke natural selection because you need self-replication in order to have natural selection. And of course, for life to start, there was no natural selection, there was no evolution. So you cannot invoke evolution in regards of the origin of life.
There was. Because in order the process to go,
no, you need self-replication in order to have selection and Darwinian evolution.
Yeah, and we can we can literally recreate self-replicating molecules in a lab.
It has never been done.
I will send you a study right now that says the opposite.
Thanks so much, Bree, for being here, Blitz.
The name of the study is going to be... Where is it? It was my... I think I titled it like mulching. Yeah, there it is. We got... Where is it? Self-replicating molecules experiment. Can't seem to find the Google Doc that I have it in, but that's fine. I can just... Oh yeah, there it is. Okay. Spontaneous emergence of self-replicating molecules containing nucleobases and amino acids by Bin Liu et al. In this, they literally just put a bunch of amino acids, shake it around, and then on its own, it forms self-replicating molecules.
Gosh, that's nonsense.
So it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So the scientists are just lying.
Well, I would have to see. Send me the paper and I'll have a look on it, but I'm very skeptical about this.
Dude literally believes that a guy rose from the dead based on a 2,000-year-old account, but doesn't believe that a group of scientists performed an experiment.
I didn't say that a group of people didn't perform an experiment. What I am skeptic about is that these amino acids and nucleobases somehow self-replicated by stochastic means. That is, in my understanding, completely impossible and nonsensical.
Yeah, so I'll give you the study and you can give us your critique of it. So it is spontaneous emergence of self-replicating molecules.
Just a minute.
Yep.
Spontaneous, yes.
Emergence of self-replicating molecules containing nucleobases and amino acids. Once again, spontaneous emergence of self-replicating molecules containing nucleobases and amino acids.
Let me check if I find it. Okay, that's from 2020, right?
Yep.
Okay. So interestingly, I have also here a paper from Martina Preiner, The Future of Origin of Life Research, Breaching Decades-Old Divisions. And she says here, many found the
so
metaphor...
you're not going to address the article that Ian's referring to?
Well, I would have to let me check if I can download it.
Yeah, it should be freely available. I'm accessing it from pubs.acs.org.
Yeah,
okay.
It was done
Just
in 2020.
I will download it, and let me check if I can give you a critique on the claims. Okay, just a minute.
Yep, let's hear it.
I see people trying to get into the TikTok queue. Just another announcement, guys. You cannot join the discussion through TikTok. Why 365? The screen literally tells you that you cannot join the discussion. I know reading comprehension is hard for some people, but it's on the screen. You must join through the third-party link just the same way that our guest Angelo joined. It's tinyurl.com/UA guest, or you can go to the YouTube video and click on the link in the description. And YouTube Extra, we're streaming to multiple platforms, and TikTok doesn't provide a way for having guests to be able to communicate audibly through multiple platforms.
Yep.
You can not like it, you can cry about it, but that's the way things are. If your
Yeah.
God doesn't have enough Holy Spirit to enable you to click a link, then you're not going to fare very well in this discussion anyways.
Okay, here is the critique, prebiotic relevance. The study explicitly states that the building blocks used for constructing the dynamic combinatorial libraries were not selected for prebiotic relevance. This undermines the claim of self-replication as a plausible prebiotic process, since the chemistry may not be feasible under early Earth conditions. Do you want me to continue?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Where are you finding this?
I just asked ChatGPT to give me a refutation.
Did you outsource your career? What's happening here?
But I mean, I don't think that your laughing is justified. If
You
you
haven't
think
given
that
a critique of the paper.
well, I am giving you what ChatGPT is giving me. If you disagree with the critique, then disagree and say why the
So
critique
what
is
what did you
false.
enter into? I'm curious. What did you enter into ChatGPT?
I entered this. Refute the claim of self-replication. Show why the claim is false.
So it's not
Yeah?
even referencing this article then.
Yes, I actually annexed the PDF. I downloaded it, annexed it on ChatGPT, and then asked to refute the claim.
Yeah. Well, if you would actually read the paper, you would encounter this unfortunate sentence. Given that networks of interconverting molecules and self-assembly processes are likely to have been immense, this
That's a
mechanism
claim.
provides a likely path for the spontaneous emergence of replicators.
This is an unsupported and unjustified claim. Now let me ask you this.
So wait, you haven't given a, do you acknowledge that
no,
you haven't given a
no.
critique of the paper? Do you acknowledge that?
Let me ask you this.
No,
How
his,
many
his
amino
actual
acids?
critique is you weren't there at the beginning, so you don't know what molecules were present. That's his
No,
critique.
let me ask you this. How many amino acids and nucleotides are used in life?
How many? This is a fact that we could easily Google. How many?
What do you take as life? What is life?
Life is self-replication. It is nutrition. It is evolution.
4.
It is the translation, signaling, information processing. There is a bunch of things that are included. What is the? If you want a scientific explanation, I'll give it to you right
We don't
now.
need any more word salad.
Yeah, wait, so do you have a critique of the paper? Because the paper actually says the exact opposite of what your critique intends. So
yeah, you will understand where I'm going with this. I asked you how many amino acids are used in life. How many types of amino acids and nucleotides?
yeah, there are 20 used in life, and then there are 4 DNA molecules.
Excellent. And how many amino acids were supposedly extant on the prebiotic Earth?
Well, oh wait, so this doesn't follow. Just because now life is composed of 20 different amino acids does not necessitate that self-replication is impossible absent use 20. So this critique is just going to be dead immediately.
Well, the quest of self-replication is completely irrelevant if you don't even know how to get the basic building blocks of life.
Wait, and I'm so sorry. Do you think the scientists who worked on this just lied?
I need to read the paper, but I just gave you the first critique. That this
What's the critique?
scenario, the first critique is that the study explicitly states that the building blocks used for constructing the dynamic combinatorial libraries were not selected for prebiotic relevance. So my question to you is this. In order for you to have even relevance in the discussion, you need to have a set of building blocks which are used today in life which would self-replicate. If there were 20 amino acids and
wait, do you agree that they created do you agree or disagree that they created self-replicating molecules?
Yes, I disagree with that.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So these molecules that they created were not self-replicating.
I would need to read the paper, but
The
I
paper is going
strongly
to tell
doubt.
you that these molecules are self-replicating.
Well, I would need to read the paper in order to convince myself that they didn't lie, but I am very skeptical that what they claim is true.
Okay, yeah. So you think that they're just lying?
I said I would first need to read the paper to convince myself that what they are claiming and telling is true, and I am strongly skeptical in regards of the claim because until 2020, actually, I have here trade. I was
So
reading it, and
this
then
paper
I was interrupted.
says that they made self-replicating molecules. Do you understand that a paper that claims to have made self-replicating molecules falsifies the claim that there's never been an instance of the creation of self-replicating molecules? Do you understand that?
Okay, listen. Here I will quote here from Martin
Yeah, wait, yes,
Heidegger.
wait, yes or no? Do you understand that?
Well, if what you are claiming is true, then yes,
Oh,
which I
perfect,
am
yeah.
skeptical about. Okay?
Okay.
So she says here, many found the metaphor appealing. A world with a jack of all trades RNA molecule catalyzing the formation of indispensable cellular scaffolds from which somehow then cells emerged.
Wait, I'm
Others
sorry,
were
what's the name of your paper?
the future of origin of life research, bridging decades-old divisions from 2020.
Research bridging decades-old divisions. Strongly opposed views which potentially hinder progress of the early research explore commonalities new theories, approaches, critical divergence points, and expectations of the future. We find that even the classical approaches and theories of the in a world where metabolism first have been proven the origin of life research there seems to be mutually exclusive. They again should be fed integrating approaches. Here pressing on recent developments that virtual classical disciplines and highlighted expectations for the future. Okay. These were published like pretty close together, so presumably if this paper is making the claim that nobody's ever done this before, at the time that they'd been accepted for publication, they would not have been able to read the paper that where the people actually do it. So then that's just an explanation for why that's the case.
The first point is that your paper is talking about nucleobases. Is that correct?
It's talking about self-replicating molecules that contain nucleobases and amino acids.
My question is, did they make the experiments with RNAs, with nucleotides, or just with nucleobases?
Yeah, it includes RNAs and literally includes mechanisms related to mutations.
Okay, did they use a template to make the replication?
What do you mean a template?
Well, a sequence which they used, which was kind of a scaffold to then achieve the self-replication of the RNA sequence.
Nope.
Okay, I've not read the paper. I'll read it afterwards, and then I can give you an assessment of the fact. Now, let's suppose that there were self-replicating RNAs. RNAs, they have a half-life depending on the temperature of days. So, let's suppose that you have a self-replicating RNA. Where do you go from that?
So the process of abiogenesis is believed to be so one of two things happened first. Either molecules that had metabolism formed and then they gained the capacity to self-replicate, then these protocells underwent Darwinian evolution to become full-blown cells, or the first two events were swapped, and what came first was the self-replicating molecules. These self-replicating molecules gained the capacity to have a metabolism, and then they became protocells, underwent Darwinian evolution to become full-blown cells. So one of those two is the order of events.
Okay. Is this a hypothesis, or is this something which has
that's just a description of abiogenesis.
Yeah, that's not what I'm asking. I want to know, is this a hypothesis which has not been confirmed in any way, or has someone demonstrated?
Tons of evidence for this. It's the theory of abiogenesis, and there's tons of evidence for it. What's the evidence that God did it?
Well, first of all, abiogenesis isn't a theory.
He's not going to answer that.
He's definitely not going to.
No, first of all, abiogenesis isn't a theory.
But
the proposition that life could come
is the
from
argument
non-life,
for God different before abiogenesis was dreamed up?
Excuse me?
Does abiogenesis, before anyone even heard about it, does it actually play a role in whether or not the evidence for God is sound? Because as far as I can tell, the evidence that you have for God is the same today as it would have been 100 years ago before abiogenesis.
Well, I would say that today we have a lot of scientific evidence which warrants to believe that there is a creator necessary, because natural explanations have failed to provide the answers how it would be possible that unguided events would bring forward the phenomena in discussion,
okay,
like
so
life.
It's just God of the gaps. That's all you've explained. How do you know that it's one God as opposed to 100 gods?
No,
oh shit, Dr. Blitz.
Listen, I can use, as I said right in the beginning, eliminative induction when one hypothesis has constantly failed to provide evidence which is demanded for, like abiogenesis, which
Wait, do you think abiogenesis doesn't have evidence?
That life from non-life by unguided means is possible. When that proposition fails, that means then that the competing hypothesis is the
friends did it. Have every piece of information via science. I guess that means God exists. Oh.
Yeah. How do you know that your God is the one that did it as opposed to the Greek pantheon?
Well, intelligent design theory doesn't propose a specific deity. All it says is that the phenomena which we see in the natural world is most likely better explained by an intelligent
right, but
cause,
that wasn't answering my question. My question is, how do you know that
you're moving goalposts to a different topic?
It's not a different topic. You came into the discussion claiming that your Christian God is the result of it because of the contrary being impossible. So what makes it impossible that the Greek pantheon is the cause of it as opposed to your God?
Okay, so let me maybe clarify a little bit better my proposition. My proposition is that the God hypothesis is superior to the no God hypothesis, and no scientific evidence has been able to demonstrate that the physical natural world and in specific life could come forward by natural means.
Yeah, but you're just
I'm so sorry.
The God hypothesis superior.
I'm so sorry. So what's the scientific evidence? So your critique of the naturalist worldview is that there's no scientific evidence that this could have come forward via natural mechanisms. What's the scientific evidence that it could have come forward via supernatural mechanisms?
I am by profession machine designer. Okay, so by profession I design blueprints, which then are used. They are sent to a factory to make machines and eventually even factories based on that information. I have never observed. I know that intelligence is a capable mechanism to make a blueprint which stores instructions to make specific devices for specific purposes, and also the information transmission mechanism. So this is positive. We know that intelligence is a capable mechanism to do this. Now, in parallel, we have analogously the exact same situation in life, where instructional information is stored in DNA, which is literally the hardware of information storage. Then there are mechanisms to transfer that.
Why does so much of our DNA not store information?
Well, let's keep just what I'm explaining now, and not.
Wait, but I just want to, because I'm just curious, and you've been yapping for a little bit. Why does so much of our DNA not store information?
Well, a part of DNA actually stores non-coding information, which is used as a regulatory mechanism for gene expression. And there is also parts which science yet has not unraveled what the function is. But let's even suppose.
Oh, wait. So then there's parts. So there's no scientific evidence for your theory.
No, there is evidence that a part of the genome.
Yeah. What's the scientific evidence that God did it?
Well, okay. What is the path to the cause? When I see a blueprint, I know that intelligence is a capable mechanism.
Is this scientific evidence?
Yes, because science comes from knowledge, from knowing. So we know that intelligence is a capable mechanism to make a blueprint which stores
So
instructional, complex, specified information to make a machine which has a specific.
but this isn't this isn't scientific evidence. Now, arguments for analogy can be strong, but like a scientific evidence would be something like hypothesis makes such and such hypothesis makes a prediction. We go out and we run an experiment or make an observation that had not yet been performed, and then we conclude based on the result from the observation of the experiment whether the hypothesis is true.
Well, I can say I don't believe that you are, or you could say to me, I don't believe that you are a machine designer and that you are capable of making a blueprint of a complex machine which
Can you
has
define
a specific
science?
function. So I can actually disprove your hypothesis.
Can you
your
define
claim.
science?
Well, science comes from the Latin scientia,
Don't
which
do
is
I mean, knowledge. That's not true.
When English speakers use the word science, they're referring specifically to a collection, to either a body of knowledge that was gained through the scientific method, or to the scientific method itself. It's like
yeah, that would be
that's an
operational
etymological fallacy.
science. There is also historical science, which ends on of the falsification principle.
Right,
and
it's
so
based on
forth.
observations instead.
Yeah, right.
You make a hypothesis and then you seek out observations, perhaps of historical events, but observations nonetheless.
Yeah. In my
let's
case,
talk about the scientific evidence for your hypothesis, which we'll generously call it. Which experiments would support that this all came about, that life came about via supernatural mechanisms? Which experiments support that?
Well, as I said, what is the permits you to make an inference to the cause.
Which wait, I'm so sorry. The next thing out of your mouth either needs to be, I'm sorry, I apologize, I actually don't have any scientific evidence, or it needs to be the name of an experiment.
Or a novel observation. That would be good too.
Okay, I have a hypothesis, a scientific hypothesis, which makes information comes always from an intelligent source. And this proposition can be falsified. Demonstrate to me a blueprint or information that directed by unguided random means, and you falsified my claim. Be my guest.
Wait a minute, do you take the position that evolution is... Oh no, you don't believe in evolution, that's right, right?
Well, I know that
evolution is real.
Well,
so if you have an evolution argument, then just run it.
I know that evolution is a fact. It depends.
Okay, well, so evolution is an unguided process that produces mechanisms, right?
Well, the problem which I am addressing here is in regards of the first genome.
That's fine, but I gave you an example of an unguided mechanism that produces machines. Evolution is, for example, even if we don't understand the first genome, certainly the first genome didn't have the capability to produce speech. However, through an evolutionary process, that machinery did develop in an unguided way. So yeah, that's a counterexample to your claim that...
That's claim.
Okay, sure. Why don't we talk about upright locomotion? That wasn't present in the first genome, but it's certainly present now. It arose via unguided evolution, for example. Unless you think that evolution just isn't a real thing, I guess.
Well, as I said, I am not an evolution denier. What evolution is has to be
well, you are. You're a young Earth creationist, right? So you are.
Well, yes, I am a young Earth creationist, but I believe that evolution is actually a thing. Now, it depends what we are talking about when we are talking about evolution. If it is about small changes, if it is about adaptation, or if we transition. But could we stay on topic?
Well, I gave you a counterexample, which is accepted by the scientific community, right? We have a wide consensus that upright locomotion developed naturally to the process of evolution.
That you need a minimal set of about 1,200 proteins, each with the size of about 300 amino acids, specified by about 1.3 million nucleotides, free living cell. Okay.
Well, the point is I produced a contradiction to the hypothesis, which means your hypothesis has been falsified.
Yeah, do you acknowledge that your hypothesis was just a critique of what Blitz just said?
Because what I am proposing, or what I am saying, has nothing to do with evolution, but with
I
the
know. What I'm
origin of
saying is that
life.
evolution is a counterexample to your hypothesis. Your hypothesis is that every single machine or every single complex machine requires a designer. Now, we have an example of upright locomotion, which is an example, it's a fairly simple machine, but it's a machine nonetheless. The machinery of the pelvis, for example, the machinery of the muscles that are in place to allow for upright locomotion, that machinery developed through a natural process that we call evolution. And it doesn't require a designer. And so, unless you're just going to disagree with the idea that upright locomotion evolved, then, which you will, because you have to, but that's not what the scientific consensus is. So now you're just saying, oh, well, I disagree with the scientific consensus because my book says otherwise.
Yeah. First of all, scientific consensus is something which is always invoked when there is no empirical scientific
To be clear,
proof
you
or
evoke
evidence.
scientific consensus regarding regarding fine-tuning.
Well, I wouldn't say that's just a consensus, but that's a fact.
Okay, well, to demonstrate your fact, you invoke scientific consensus, and then when I pressed you on it, we changed topics.
Well, whatever.
Yeah, so does scientific consensus give you justification or does it not?
Well, okay, so there was scientific consensus 100 years ago.
That was a yes or no question.
Yeah.
Well, I disagree with that. I don't think that
You can say no.
Consensus, yes, no.
Okay. Now what?
Okay.
Now tell us why.
So then you disagree with yourself, okay.
But I mean, you were going to say something about 100 years ago?
I mean, 100 years ago, the scientific consensus was that the universe was in a steady state, and that was overturned with the Big Bang.
Yep.
So,
It was overturned with evidence.
Often scientific consensus is overturned when new scientific evidence comes up. So,
okay, so where's the new scientific evidence that overturns neo-Darwinism, or rather, it's called the there's a name for it. It starts with an S. There's a more modern version of it. What's the new evidence that
I would be
debunks that?
very happy to go into that topic because it is fascinating. I've just published
Modern
a paper.
synthesis, thank you.
I've just published a paper on self-fate,
what journal?
determination, and differentiation.
What journal are you publishing?
Excuse me? You can
Gotcha. You just threw it up on the internet.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Was your co-author GPT at all?
Absolutely. Yes, I used ChatGPT to make my investigations.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
What would you have done 10 years ago if ChatGPT wasn't available?
Well, I have a blog on which is called reasonandscience.catsport.com, and I've written articles since 2009. So I don't depend on ChatGPT to investigate science.
Okay, that's good. I would suggest, just for the sanity of everybody, I would suggest avoiding it because it looks really bad. Like anybody reading it who recognizes it's just generated by a LLM.
Yeah, I mean ChatGPT
like, even if it's
know
right,
things. It just has
even if it's right, people will think it's wrong.
Yeah, I am a big promoter of artificial intelligence, and the skepticism that you are exposing, I see it from all sorts of sides, from theists, from atheists, from all kinds of people.
That's reasonable.
And I think I am approaching it from a little bit more pragmatic view, while I agree that there is a lot of false information provided by ChatGPT and other AI bots. This can be reviewed and checked, and then you discard what is false and retain what is useful. And I think the useful part is enormous.
So just a question, and this is unrelated to the topic. Do you cite ChatGPT in your book? Like, do you say, this text was heavily written or heavily influenced by or heavily supported by such and such LLM? Because otherwise, it's plagiarism, right?
Yeah, no. Right at the beginning of all my books, I declare that I'm using artificial intelligence to make my investigation. So I'm not hiding that.
Okay.
I mean, as long as you're like assassinating your own ethos right from the top, as long as you're literally killing all semblance of credibility that you might have from page one, that's fine.
Yeah, as I said, there is still a lot
Deny,
of prejudice,
defend,
but
something?
I think that it is an extremely useful tool to investigate scientific topics. And if someone filters out what is wrong, then I mean, when you write it without artificial intelligence, then you can make a peer review and check if the information is correct. And you can do the same thing, the same process with artificial intelligence. I see no difference in that. So that's why I think that these criticisms, they are warranted if someone simply blindly accepts and copy pastes everything that comes from AI. But if you do actually the diligence and check if the information is correct or not, then you can have a pretty good advance on scientific topics.
So we gotta call it soon. But one thing that I'm a bit curious about: did you verify whether or not ChatGPT was giving you true information when you were asking it for a critique of the paper? Did you verify the critique?
No, we are on a live stream. I mean, I would.
So you cited
wouldn't-
this
you
without
wouldn't- you
verifying
wouldn't
it. Got
you
it.
wouldn't wait a half an hour for me to do the whole process and then discuss it. So, in order just to have a continuation of the conversation, I just told you what it gave me and gave you the opportunity to refute it.
Yep. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
cool.
do you accept the review of the Seesaw that ChatGPT was wrong about the Seesaw business?
About what?
The Seesaw that a Seesaw is not an example of simultaneous cause and effect.
No, that wasn't ChatGPT. That's actually an argument which I investigated before AI.
Okay,
So-
well, do you accept that it's wrong? Because here's a scientist reviewing it and telling it that actually this is false, and here's why.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we got Blitz has to get going, but we appreciate you coming on up here.
Sure, it was fun to have a talk. Usually, I am often taking off the stream by atheists, and you guys gave me the time to have actually a little bit more extended conversation. So I appreciate it, and I think you are all pretty intelligent guys.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, big
Let's
W.
go.
Thanks for talking with us.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Cheers. Have a good one.
Bye bye.
All right. Hey, if you want to support the stream, but you don't have like any financial means to do so or don't want to do it that way, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, watching these videos on YouTube. It allows us to make the transfer to the YouTube platform a lot easier for when TikTok gets banned. Also, we can start monetizing it if we get to, I think it's like 3,000 hours of watch
Right.
time. So if you
Which we
wanted
might
to,
already be at, by the way.
I
Well,
doubt it.
I don't
We
think so.
One of our the last stream has over 2,000 views.
That's true, but people only it counts it as a view even if you just watch it for like a small amount of time. So
That's true.
yeah, we'll have to
Anyway,
look at that. But
Details.
yeah, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. It's Unapologetic Live. There's no space between Unapologetic and Live. It's
says it, like,
very
right
helpful. It allows us to
here-ish?
monetize, and we're if we
Here?
get to 1,000, then we can start playing ads on these videos. God, help
Which
us
I'm
get
sure
the
you'll
ad
love.
revenue. Yeah.
We are at 686 public watch hours. By the end of
Yeah, I
next
get that.
week, we'll probably be over 1,000. But we really need to get over 3,000 public watch hours and 1,000 viewers. I'm sorry, 1,000 followers. We're at 784 followers. So if you're watching this right now on TikTok and you're thinking, hey, how will I see this when TikTok goes away? The channel is right here on the screen, Unapologetic Live on YouTube. We would love it if you would go and follow us there for when TikTok goes dark, guys.
Absolutely would love it. Yeah, and also ring that bell. That's a phrase that people say on YouTube. I don't understand why, but ring that bell.
That's what the kids say. Yeah.
Skibbity the Ohio or something.
Yeah.
How do we
but-
end this, guys?
Well,
Make
we
sure
ran
you're
out of-
raising up that subscribe button. Make sure you're gadding that like button on YouTube. But other than that, we're ending stream. Thanks all
Goodbye.
so much for spending this time with us.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much. We'll see you again. Is it next week? What's today?
Next week, yeah.
Yeah, next week.
Roughly
guys.
same time.
All right, we'll talk about it. 'Cause the holidays are coming up. We'll have to make sure everyone's still available and what time. But we'll see you next week, most likely, guys. As far as I can tell. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all the likes and the gifts and the support. We really appreciate it. And make sure you're following our Unapologetic account on TikTok. That's the account in the bottom box down there. For in the event that TikTok doesn't get banned, because we'll be going live on that account in the future. Thank you so much, guys.